담지 내가 내교지 nghiરો 담지 따도 또왔다 산중 셈바가나 수주바 대다 큰 길에는 교지
Good morning, everyone. May I please have your attention for a bit? So, welcome again. Just 2 more days to go. I hope you guys are having fun. So today it's the economy track day, and then first session will be starting with Mr. Rashvin Pal Singh, who will be talking about unlocking assets and opportunities within Fab Labs and Creative Hubs. So over to you, Mr. Rashvin. All right. I'd request everyone to be seated. Yeah, thank you.
Right. Hey, everybody. Good morning. Woo! This is like a little FAB exercise, no? Just some good energetic spirits in the morning. Thank you for being here. We're very excited. We'll jump into it right away. So today, I'm Rashvin Pal Singh and my partner, Gurpreet, or fondly known as G. So we're going to share a little bit about unlocking assets and opportunities in Fab Labs and Creative Hubs. And we got 30 minutes, and we're going to make it a super personal sharing opportunities, collaborative opportunities. We'll spend the first half a little bit on our story and how we started, what we did, the struggles we went through, and then what are the solutions we are working on now. And then the last bit will be collaborative things we can work on together. Because we're really passionate about growing the hub ecosystem, creative hubs and Fab Labs, and we want to see how we can all work together. Cool.
Thank you. So just a little bit of background. Me and Rash studied together in college, university, and then we lived together. And Rash was working in PwC as a consultant, and I was a maker, so I was living in the jungle building machines. And over time, we both had the same problems. We really wanted to see how we can do business in a different way, and we really wanted to make the world a better place. So we started working together with our best friends. And it's not just the two of us. Everything that we're going to share with you today is largely attributed to our team. We have an amazing bunch of people who've been with us from day one. They are the backbone of the work that we do. And we really are only one small part of this team today. And they enable us to do all the different projects, etc., that we've embarked on over the past 12 years.
So if I'll just share a little bit, right? So we started off 2013, and as we were sharing, I did corporate, G was in discipline as a mad scientist, engineering kind of guy. We wanted to find a way to live more sustainably. That was our first mission, right? So we had no access to spaces or labs, so we started working from home. We lived in a condo together with our friends, and we made furniture from home. Our neighbors thought we were constantly renovating. They got pretty annoyed at us, right? We were doing electronic projects from the house, late night, little sleep.
Yes, and eventually we managed to get enough cash to rent a bungalow on the side of a housing neighborhood, and that was our first Fab Lab. So we were inspired by Pier 9 in San Francisco, and we really wanted to create this prototyping and production center. But with the budgets that we had, we created a wood workshop, a metal workshop, electronics lab, a textiles lab. We had volunteer accommodations, and we outgrew these houses because the city council said you can't do production at 2 in the morning when you have neighbors around you, so they kicked us out. We moved to a factory, a little bit more of an industrial space. We had water jet cutters over here. We were building art sculptures, and we were really trying to see how we can be a part of this ecosystem together, right? And fortune had us that eventually, after years of trying, we managed to go a little bit more commercial along the way.
Yeah, so that was one of our early failures when we had a massive space, a huge factory, right? However, we didn't understand how to do a big scale production maker type movement. We were making bags, we had furniture, art installations, but after 2 years, we kind of had to shut it down. So that was our first failure in like growing too big, not knowing the right monetization models or sustainability models. However, when one door closes, another door opens. So we got a partnership with a mall to set up a maker space in the mall, right? And we were paying much below market rent in return for running free content with the mall. So it's one of those like public-private partnerships. So mereka is the Malay word, or it's an Indonesian word for they and them, people, and also the act of creating. So reka means design, create, so people, act of creating. So it's something we feel strongly about. And we'll go through, so we got a pretty cool space. We're very excited about it. There's a space for public workshops. We've got a fabrication lab. We've got a design electronic studio with laser cutters, 3D printers, and a small IoT corner over there. This was a VR lab before this, but during COVID, having VR headsets is pretty awkward, as you can imagine. Too much of like, unsanitized touching. So we converted that into green screens, and this has been our most popular lab since. So one is fully booked. We're setting up another one with another media group back home. They are investigative journalists, and they want to have a public media lab for people to create content, right? Classroom, we also do yoga over here. Important, no? A bit of chill, a bit of zen. Public event spaces. Meeting room, of course, and we've got a cloud kitchen as well, where we've got 3 foodpreneurs who operate out of there, and food, as we were sharing the other day. Food is a very important part to bring people together. So essentially, I've shared with you about Mereka Space, right, the first one, and our aim is to build talent in the future of work. That takes up 10% of our team. Our biggest team is in our academy team. And over here, we run online content and we help youth and adults with the future of work. I'll share a bit more on that. And there's Mereka Connect, which is our platform for creative hubs, which is our North Star. And G will share a lot more about that after this.
That's right.
So if I jump into the Connect side, this is the academy side. Very interesting. Before COVID, right, all we did was in the space, mostly in KL, around KL. 99% of learners were from space connected. Of course, we all know COVID was so tough for spaces. We quickly made our content available online, and today, only 30% of our learners are from the Klang Valley area. 70% are from rural parts in Malaysia, smaller cities, and Indonesia as well. So one of those silver linings in a crisis, right? But essentially what we do at the academy is, we saw a big gap in youths and adults earning income or securing jobs. So we help them to secure jobs through a digital entrepreneur course, to be a freelancer in the creative economy, or to secure a job with a big organization. And we've got live office hours, great assignments, but we're piloting a very, very small distributed education model over here, where we've got learners online now, and everyone's hungry for in-person interactions. So what we're doing now is we're working with hubs in Malaysia, and our online learners will be sent to hubs to get access to coaches, experts, and to use their co-working facilities. Now, I've shared this part, and next is my partner, Gurpreet. He likes to talk about problems, so I'll pass it to him.
Hi. So essentially, we wanted to share with you the work that we do, so you have an overall picture about how we got here. And I think the problems that we have and we saw around us, maybe some of you resonate with this too. The first and biggest problem that we had is, as a creative hub, as a makerspace, as a content provider, as a asset provider for machines, etc., we sit on so much of this, and it's just lying there. We create new stuff all the time. We're makers. That's what we do. And then how do we get those resources out there to people over and over again? A fab lab, a makerspace, our vision 24/7, and we want people to be flocking in the space. It should be full. It should be thriving. It should be buzzing. But it's not always the case. Maybe it's different in different regions. But where we are and the partners that we have, this is a huge problem that we saw. And we keep creating new things, but we don't capitalize on our existing assets well. Second problem, yes, I do like problems. Not many people know about what we do. All of us here is like, us sharing this video is preaching to the choir. But generally out there, when people come to our space, they be like, what? Yeah, what is this? What do you guys actually do? How come I never knew you existed? Didn't know such things like this were there in the world. So this was a big problem, not just for the customers, but also for the businesses who wanted to access makerspaces and work together with Fab Labs. They had trouble navigating our business model. What do you guys really do? How do you guys make money? How can we work with you? So that was a big issue that we saw. And lastly, I think all of us embark on building our websites, building digital solutions using software tools, but no one thing caters to our unique use case. And that's an issue, right? We try to hack it. You try to use a website. My first attempt in building a solution for our team involved 95 plugins on WordPress and crashing the site about 25 times over a month. So eventually we realized there is a need for us to consolidate all the different toolkits that we have sitting on Google Docs. Our users are in multiple Excel sheets for multiple events. We have, bookings is a complex process, it's manual, there's lots of emails, there's lots of back and forths. And we really wanted to solve this problem. This is something that we saw was a big need for our community. So we can take a moment to reflect the kind of resources that we have. It's really not limited to this. All of us are sitting on so much, right? We have so much to offer. As a Fab Lab, as a makerspace, we see ourselves as community builders. We're here to provide value in our communities to actually be the bridge between the people who need it and the things that they need to access, right? So, yeah, these are some of the resources that we saw. So we asked ourselves, how can we unlock the assets and create opportunities for Fab Labs and creative hubs? Because if the problems we face were real, we believe we were not the only ones who faced these problems, and we wanted to see how we could create a solution to tackle this together in the ecosystem and provide value within the network. So we embarked on creating a tech platform, probably the worst idea we've ever had. It was really tough. As a maker, I think this is the most tough thing we've ever made. We came from an education background. We came from a creative arts background. Rash came from a finance background. We didn't know how to do this. We didn't know where to start, but we wanted to do this and we did it anyway, right? So we'll share a little bit about what the tool looks like today with you, so you can see and understand visually. Essentially, there's experiences that you can have. We have a varied number of hubs. We have online experiences, physical experiences. We have a module for spaces, so you can actually book a space within a creative hub. These are the labs that we have within our hub. So essentially, one platform to discover this network, right? And of course, finding all hubs under one collection would really make a difference to people who are navigating a city or a country.
So then the big part comes is also on the hub profile. So as you can see, as it floats, we feel each hub has so much of a story to tell. So we built custom hub profile pages, and the hub profile pages from the top highlight the different rooms, the different spaces that you have, the different content that you're hosting in your hub, as well as what does your hub offer to people. Do you want to try? Okay, yeah, let's. Okay, so and then there's a big part where you want to list. So we call it experiences, but essentially it's workshops, talks, classes. We find experiences to be a more engaging way of connecting with people. So you would have a welding workshop, you have a ticket checkout counter right away, you can book workshops for like one-off or recurring workshops, right? And it talks about learning objectives, you can see the slots available, and then you go into a Stripe payment gateway right away. Spaces is another thing we're working on for, again, as hubs, we have a lot of spaces, we have our different labs, our different facilities. How do we get these spaces to be booked? So this is a big one that we're looking at. Expertise is another very, I find this quite exciting, right? Because we have so many people who call us. So what happened was that people will write to Mereka, like Gmail, our Facebook, I want to book your lab. I'm looking for an IoT engineer. How do I book them? Then we're like checking calendars, emailing them back. They're telling us, oh, I can't do this. Slots, such a manual process, right? So we felt, hey, why don't we list the expertise in our hub? Because there is the expertise that we have, our team, but also we have a network of other makers, and they also want to list what they can do. So now it's just a profile of experts, but essentially we want to see how you can book their time right away. And for me personally as well, there's all these toolkits that exist, right? Like Creative Hub toolkits, content creation toolkits, all these resources. And I see the FABLabs.io website doing an amazing job at this. So we want to see how we could just plug in and support all the resources over there. Because we also create so much, right? So I'm really excited on this part.
Okay, so we didn't just build a platform. Along the way, as I said, we didn't know what we were doing when we started. We really saw a need to have a dashboard for the hubs to be able to manage all their community, to manage their content, right? So we have features for messaging, as you've seen, a calendar where you can actually manage your different slots. Of course, your bookings are unique. Not all bookings are paid. Sometimes you have 20 people that you just want to add them. You want to invite people. So those were functions that we had to take into account. We automatically email reservation details, etc., to the learners. Reminders. We handle cancellations. We handle refunds. We handle complex scenarios of financial transfers, so that maybe the hub takes 60%, but the expert takes 40%. These are different facets of the platform that we needed to take into account. And of course, we guide you through the experience creation or space creation process so that you can actually do this thing right. And another thing that was quite difficult for us to make was a role-based access control system, because hubs are not managed by 1 or 2 people. There's at least 10 members in your team. You have partners, but the person who runs the workshop, they're not even part of your hub. They're from another hub. So we had to factor all this logic when we wanted to see how we can give different people granular access permissions into using this platform. And of course, KYC requirements, connections to your bank accounts, looking at your overall financial flows, so a single source of truth, right?
Oh man, refunds are so complex, right? Because if the person cancels, it's quite clear cut. Okay, they can. But if the hub changes the date, do you refund? Do you not? What are the policies? Oh my God, all these legal aspects was quite a nightmare, but we're still learning. But when you start realizing you're dealing with money, things get really complex.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, we have a more loose definition of a hub. We really see the hub as a community builder, right? So we wanted to empower the community builders, and Fab Labs and Makerspaces are part of it. We've seen people who have content from like nonprofits and social enterprises, creative and arts hubs. There's so many different kinds of content and resources out there that can benefit people. So, these are our hub community at the moment. So to date, we have about 9,000 users, 7,500 bookings on the platform, of which maybe close to 2,000 are the only ones that are paid. And a lot of it are free content, right? So we'll get into that a little bit in a second. We've managed to channel about 60,000 USD towards our hubs and the hub network through 30 active hubs who actually use this platform regularly and create content. So we are only based in 9 countries, but we have the potential to scale to close to 70 countries because we use something called Stripe Connect. And we had to even go to the extent of opening a company in the United States, in Delaware, just so that we can actually reach hubs outside of Malaysia. So what we've just shown you is a tip of the iceberg. There is so much that needs to be done. There is so many things that creative hubs, makerspaces, Fab Labs require. You've seen the Fab Labs IO platform yesterday. There is so many features, right? And we're committed to working on this over the coming years so that we can actually bring value to the people who actually build communities. So we did fail a lot. I like problems, I like failures, I like learning. And we're going to share with you a little bit about where we failed, right? So building the tech platform, as I said, is something like we've never embarked on before. Software development is complex. Building websites was fun and good and things, but like when you actually want to take it into account, customized platform, not coming from such a background, it was very difficult. Over the years, we've spent over 400,000 USD from our projects, from our education work, to channel it into this platform, which is our North Star. because there's so many features, right? And there's so many things that the hubs need. Like, for example, managing time, we thought it was easy. Yeah, somebody wants to do a workshop on this date, you put a time slot and it's done. But no, time management is complex business. You know, you want to take into account recurring models, you want to take into account ticket types, holding tickets, cancellations, refunds, etc. Time zones, you know, whether because you might have a user in Indonesia want to come and do a workshop in Malaysia. And if it's an online class, it's a different time. If it's a physical class, it's a different time. And the financial management also is really complex because we have a customized model where we want to be able to pay the hubs, the expert, two different hubs at the same time. So we had to factor in all these different scenarios and actually code those logics based on the request that came in. And scaling internationally was something that we really wanted to do from the start. Looking back, maybe we should have made this work in Malaysia first. But like, you know, we had big dreams and we didn't know how difficult it was going to be. You know, we had to take into account multi-currency, multilingual, bank transfers across these regions. And it took us a long time to actually get everything right along the way. We still haven't got it right. And, you know, we're still working on it every single day, right? And hubs are collaborative. So we really needed a tool that reflected the collaborative nature of hubs. You know, we want to do partnerships. We want to work together with you. Maybe you have your content. We have our space. How can we factor in all these different scenarios into the platform? And we didn't know whether we should have built a platform or just a tool for hubs. So we built both. And that's probably another mistake that we made along the way. I think if we did a SaaS tool, it would have been much faster and much simpler. And those are things that we learned today, and we're taking those steps over the coming years to fix, right? And of course, users demand a perfectly seamless experience in a digital world powered by tech giants in Silicon Valley.
It's interesting, right? Because users are so used to tech. I mean, we're all so familiar, but also that means expectations of seamlessness is so high. We get people, it's loading like a bit more than 3 seconds. They're like, yeah, you know, like payment checkouts, if it doesn't move smooth, people get annoyed very quickly if tech doesn't work. So balancing that expectation has been quite a stress.
Absolutely. And, you know, from a hubs and community viewpoint, you know, although hubs have so many requests and so many needs, they really want simplicity when they use their platform. And we were trying to figure out how can we get more and more hubs who would see this as something of value. And one of the things we know, if the hubs believe they can earn more and they can grow their sustainability and their income through using the platform, then there's a no-brainer that they're going to use this, right? So I guess, like, you know, some of you might be tech people over here, you know about user stories. And like the best user story I've learned after the 3 years of doing this is, as a user, I don't really want to use your platform at all, right? So that's what we're trying to figure out, how we can make that work. We're looking a lot at how we can actually get funds from businesses and be able to teach consumers through the platform. You know, we see that like whenever we have a brand sponsoring a workshop that's run by a particular hub, it gets booked instantly within an hour, like 25 tickets, 30 tickets.
It's been
right?
quite good. So a lot of brands are seeing how they want to connect to creative communities or like niche communities. So we work with Vans, Adidas. So it tends to be more lifestyle, fashion style brands so far, but they're looking for the cool groups, right? And actually a lot of laser cutting work happens because they want custom branding, custom logos, and we just try to and what we do, we try to facilitate this type of brands to the hubs that we work with. And then we take a small percentage, the hub then runs the workshops and gets their work going on.
And as a digital platform being built during the pandemic, we totally forgot about in-person payments. So like, you know, what happened was like, you know, it became a really smooth experience online, but on the day during the event, like it was a bit hard because like, you know, you can't just go and touch your card and just go into the experience and everything is
no QR codes, right? So people got so annoyed. Like,
so these are things that we've been fixed. Some of this we've fixed, some of this we're working on over the way, like reporting and analytics, exports, getting the data, how many people viewed their experience, how many people are interested, how many people favorited it. Those are all things that were missing along the way that we're working on now.
Okay, what's our time quickly? Sorry, I left my phone. Okay, so I'll do it quick. So this is where we see, like, so in terms of insights, right? We see Fab Labs hubs operate on 3 types of models. The first model is really just rental event. We rent spaces out or we rent machines out. The second one is prototyping, where we provide prototyping services and consultancy, where hubs, they book expert hours. And the third one is content. Hubs run content. So far, we've seen the hubs in our region. Content has been the most successful one for the hubs. It's the part that they can scale the most. In a way, if you think about it, some of this spaces are limited by time, consultancy also by time or machine hours, but content actually can grow a lot more. And we really want to see how we can partner with the hubs here on content. I cannot tell you how excited I am on February Academy. I hope I said it right. Right, Academy. Academy is for me one of the most amazing things happening because it's a distributed education model. It taps into like the experts and networks at hubs, and I'm just blown by this concept, and I'm so excited that you guys are like leading the path on distributed education. And we've been dreaming about this as well, right? Because essentially all of us hubs like have so much assets, and when we built this platform, we were also seeing how could we use the machines at different spaces, the talent at different spaces, have content run at a global or international level. So distributed education is something we're really excited, and I'm so glad that we can learn from the foundation, from the academy. What we want to do, and our simple call to action is, how can we, so another thing we see is how can we share simpler content? So there's distributed education like the masters that's being run, right, at FAB Barcelona, and that's like more in-depth, 12-week, 9-week courses. We see a lot, 6 months. So we see 12-month courses. So we see between hubs, right, a lot of us have 2-hour workshops, 4-hour workshops, 2-day boot camps, and this content is actually interchangeable. So we've been sharing content with hubs in Malaysia, and they've been running our content for like on a small profit share model. So we give them all the slides, all the materials, they go and run it. So we see a chance to share and monetize content, and we all are talking about the same topics, right? We all know the sustainability challenges, environment challenges, inclusivity challenges, and of course, looking at the tech tool where, for example, we could list the content that we have. So we've got this egg board workshop, we've got this like laser cutting workshop to make a planter pot. It needs a laser cutter, it needs a basic designer. And then we can see which hubs have this expertise in machine, and they can tomorrow try to run this workshop. So we really want to start by just seeing, we'll share this in the WhatsApp groups and all, which hubs want to start sharing content, and we'll try to work on a way where we can list this content and then partner. So that my dream is this, right? Now we have maybe about 20 modules, but there's probably 100 more that we can run that we don't know, that somebody else here has created. So how can we just take that, maybe you guys, maybe do a small TOT session and then we run with it. So essentially my last, is how we can work together is get a hub profile. That's a really exciting way to start. Super simple. Tap into our network. So we've got a network of 200 hubs. If there's something of relevant to this, let us know. For example, the team that's making Roldan and Maxim, they were making these machines, artists craft machines relevant to our community. So we're going to share the newsletter to our hubs and say, hey, check out this Fab Lab, check out this guy. So anything that you think is relevant, let us know. We want to build a membership model. So if you got any insights on that, let us know, as well as content sharing, what I just shared. Cool. I hope we have time for a question or two, but me and G, woo, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Do you guys have any questions? I think we can take in 2 questions.
Okay, sweet.
Yep. Anyone?
Yeah? Chelsea.
In terms of building your network with different hubs, did you find that you had to pull people in and kind of reach out to build this network? Or did people come to you, or in different hubs come to you and did it form organically?
It was honestly mostly reaching out personally. So we tried both. So G is all about big net, right? Newsletters, videos, slow. Like the success has been reaching out one-to-one, and we check out their social medias and we're like, hey, you do cool stuff. We think this will work for you.
It really does involve like a very person-to-person, very intensive but fruitful
But for
effort.
now, right? So we're still like officially only 18 months since we've
Okay.
made it public. So now it's slowly we're finding hubs discovering us on our own. And that's just started in the last 3-4 months. People are like, hey, this is cool. I heard it from someone. But the whole initial part was very manual.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? So where are you? You said you felt like you were a miserable failure at first, right? Which is actually a good sign in a way. But where are you? Do you feel like with sustainability in terms of this platform and what you do? Are you able to sustain yourself? Are you kind of where are you on the spectrum?
Absolutely not yet. So we focus on our education work so that we can invest and build this platform at the moment, right? We're constantly strategizing the whole trip in Bhutan, and whenever we're together, we see different strategies, and some of it involve even taking the core functionalities and the features of the platform and creating a really simple monetization tool for the biggest service economy, and then actually focusing our efforts on the impact of a creative hub network and investing further into the complexity that's involved in this process.
But essentially, we were self-funding it now from the education work and our space work. That's more profitable, like we're sustainable on that side. So then we invest in our tech side. Because we have so right now how it works is free for hubs to use, free content free. If it's a paid content, we take 3% and 3% goes to Stripe. We want to have a subscription model, but we're not there yet. So now it's just a 3% fee, and most hubs are like, that's great. We don't even think about 3%. So that's very small, but we see this as like another 2-3 year effort. So we are looking at fundraising as well down the road, but we got to get it. Maybe in 6 months, we'll be ready for that. Our space itself. Yeah, the space itself works pretty well. Not massively, but it breaks even plus a little bit.
Okay, thank you. A big round of applause for Rashfin and Gurpreet here.
You'll be here. Come ask us. We're really happy to share transparently what worked, what didn't work, right? So thank you so much. Woo!
Thank you, guys. So next up, we have Okezue Bell. Of course, this is the economy track day, but he fits in all the 4 tracks. So you have economy, youth and education, technology, innovation, community, sustainability. Okezue is 17-year-old, and then he has multiple startups. So I'd request everyone to enjoy him. And then, yes, over to you.
Right. Hello, everyone. I think technology has clearly been one of the unifying concepts of this conference. But I think one thing I want to urge you all to consider is what happens when we deploy technology and it doesn't work. Obviously, there are so many benefits from education to industry to research, but there are also a significant amount of negatives that can emerge if we don't focus on something we call responsible technology. And this has been a concept, especially with the advent of AI, that government, that industry have been focusing on. And so I wanted to air that out to you today and talk a little bit about what it looks like when it's actually put in practice. So my sort of draw to responsible technology was really informed by getting to work in so many different research areas. As a young person, I don't have to commit to any specific industry or occupation, so I had the fortune of getting to bounce around a lot of different labs, as you can see here, from working in things like genetic engineering to neuroscience. One thing I realized is that once you add this sort of interpersonal aspect of technology where you're deploying your solutions to real people, there are considerations that you start to have to make. I mean, tech initially is this unfettered opportunity for discovery and exploration. You can deploy technologies, you can conduct research in any area, and you can really figure out what you're interested in and make new discoveries. But the moment that you want to deploy these discoveries to communities, that's when you start to have to make this human consideration. And so this is what happens when you don't make that consideration. We have the case of Mr. Ba, where he was misidentified by Apple's facial recognition system, ended up wanting to sue them for $1 billion because they put an 18-year-old in jail for crimes that he didn't commit. We have cases like TikTok's algorithm pushing self-harm glorifying content on young students and actually leading to the suicide of a teenage boy. We have systems like ShotSpotter, which detect gunshot sounds in already over-policed communities. And when it was incorrectly pinged to a 13-year-old boy's location, he was shot and killed by police. So what am I doing all of this for? What does this all say? It tells us that tech can kill, tech can hurt people, and tech needs to be deployed correctly. And so what does that look like? Well, first, one framework that I've been using when I'm deploying my technologies in my startups and in my research is this 3-step innovation framework. The first part is communicating with and actively involving stakeholders in the design and development process. Imagine if over-policed neighborhoods were involved in the process of developing gunshot detection tools. They would be able to audit them appropriately, ensure that they're implemented in their communities properly, and make sure that they're not resulting in deaths of young people. Imagine if they were involved and intervened in the strategy and the tech was never deployed at all. It would have saved a young boy's life. The second part is one of the most important parts, is how we assess impact. We want to do this via intervention, reach, and shared positive outcomes. This means not only quantifying our results, but also qualifying them on lives impacted, positive benefits experienced by the community, et cetera, et cetera. If we're simply measuring on how many people our solution or technology has reached, we're cutting out a really important context of how it's actually reaching them and how it's actually affecting them. So we need to make that consideration. And then thirdly, having an on-ground presence to establish trust, vet results, and make products accessible or well received. It's really obvious when you just drop technology in a community, 10 out of 10 times is going to fail. It's really important that you not only involve incumbents on the development process, but also ensure that you have representatives stationed in such communities so that you can ensure that your technology is actively working and can audit it as necessary. Feedback is a huge part of being an entrepreneur or deploying technology in general. And that's why programs like the FAB Labs and FAB in a Box are actually so important, because we're deploying technology and establishing institutions for research within communities, meaning that incumbents themselves will be able to develop technology, deploy it, and ensure its effectiveness. So now, I want to give you an example of how I was able to apply this framework to my own research. One of my main research areas was in neuroscience, specifically computational neuroscience, where I was analyzing brain signals using a variety of different algorithms to be able to interpret, if I'm thinking one thing, what does that electrical impulse that's being sent from my brain to my muscle actually mean? Well, one huge problem for amputees is that current prosthetic arms today are ineffective at deciphering these signals, and they're also highly expensive. So applying this framework, I spoke with amputees, I involved them in my development process, I had an on-ground presence in amputee coalitions, and was able to develop what I call the We Arm, which is a low-cost prosthetic arm for individuals with below-the-elbow amputations. We were able to open source our model. It's now being built in places like Ukraine and Afghanistan and Iran, and with deployment techniques. And we're also doing a closed source version that I'll be able to deploy and do some paid pilots with at hospitals to ensure its effectiveness. This is a perfect example of how we take research from bench to bedside. A lot of times we see research die in a lab, but one of the most important things it can do is actually be implemented. Imagine if the cure for cancer existed, but it was never deployed to a hospital or it never saw any cancer patients. Imagine how much innovation and utility would be lost. And so, as you can see here, one of the main things that we capitalized on was making sure that it was very human-like, but also using really low-cost materials to make it accessible. In fact, it costs under $700 to manufacture. As you can see, we relied mostly on software approaches, integrated things like haptic feedback, made it flexible enough for amputees to use, as well as lightweight enough that it was comfortable. But now, what if I want to take this one step further? I've been talking about this framework with thousands of students around the globe through organizations like the UN's Sustainable Development Solutions Network or the NAACP. But what if I wanted to now solve a systemic problem? A problem that's entrenched in a community or an organization or in a nation, and really solve it? Because, with something like healthcare, we can build a product and deploy it. But for something like what I'm about to talk about, this problem is not only an issue for a specific community, but it's a result of years of historical discrimination that's entrenched with so many other issues. So what does it look like when we solve a systemic problem? Well, it looks like talking to people like Alice. She's a low-income single mother of 4, an underpaid teacher trying to live and provide for her family, but there's just one caveat. She doesn't have a bank account. No bank account means she can't prove ownership over her own assets, and she can't effectively provide or sustain herself and her children. But what if I told you that Alice isn't just one person, but she's actually 2.5 billion people? She's asset limited, income constrained, but employed, and she represents over 90% of the unbanked population where financial tasks are nearly impossible and they're blacklisted from this big banking bureaucracy, making it near impossible to mobilize upward. People like Alice are domestic abuse victims. They're indigenous communities. They're farmers. They're climate practitioners. They're youth. What do we do when we have a problem like this that's not only pervasive in so many communities, but confounded by discrimination on so many minority groups? Well, we first start off by addressing the community and developing a solution. So Fidutam is my social enterprise. It's a registered public benefit corporation, and it's the result of over 400 interviews with unbanked communities around the globe. As you can see, it's a SIM card-based application that provides digital identification and microloans to underserved and unbanked communities. So to give you a sense of how it works, it's essentially first we start off with the SIM card, it's put inside of a phone, and then what happens is we have this WhatsApp-based app that users can interact with, which means that we're overcoming that initial hurdle of not forcing them to have enough digital literacy to the point where they have to interact with a new application. So that's one important consideration that we made when talking with communities. Then, when it's put inside of the phone, they enter in a selfie image, which through a series of convolutional neural networks, or basically image processing AI algorithms, we can decode into a bunch of letters and numbers, which we can then encrypt onto a blockchain. And what this means is that they now have a unique combination that's significant to them, and it serves as a digital identity. Then what we can do is we can attribute microloans of $50 to $100 with no interest, payable within a year, to these unbanked communities. But what does $50 to $100 actually do for someone? Well, we've been able to deploy around $150,000 worth of microloans with an 100% repayment rate, and they've been able to collectively make $400,000 in profit by the unbanked with over 1,100 users. And so what this actually means is that first, some of our users are selling combat boots in their community. Some of our users are domestic abuse victims who are using it to open up new job opportunities. Some of our users are traditional birth attendants from Uganda using their digital identity to increase their income from $17 to $170 per month. There's almost an unlimited amount of capacity that these unbanked communities have if we provide them with the right financial runway. And recognizing the amount of attacks that technology has sort of facilitated due to irresponsible innovation, Fidutam has now expanded to be a collective of over 1,300 students fighting for responsible technology, both on political advocacy on both sides of the aisle, as well as on corporate development processes. As we know, the Frontier Model Forum was actually just released as a collective through Google and all of the leading organizations in AI. And so our hope is to be involved as a civic society organization working towards becoming stakeholders and creating a bridge between the underserved and the decision makers, which has never existed before. And so beyond this, what we do is we look towards existing methods to ensure that our solution is effective. So let's start with mobile money. Let's compare it to Fidutam. Well, first of all, solutions like M-Pesa actually have been successful in places like Kenya. It's this digital application through SIM, again, that users can sort of trade money, they can take out loans. It's quite an accessible application. But first of all, this solution actually requires internet. Fidutam's application doesn't, because we're using mobile network operators as sort of edge servers that we can use to outsource our computation, meaning that no computational or internet-based tasks are actually being performed on the user's device. So we made that consideration of creating an added layer of accessibility for our users by making sure that it doesn't first require a significant amount of digital literacy, but then second, that it's accessible when there's no internet available. Then beyond that, if we actually look to history, traditional microloaning has not been very successful. In 2010, it caused a crisis in India because of the fact that people were issuing out loans with such high amounts of interest that it resulted in something called predatory loans, where a lot of users were unable to repay their loans. Then the lenders lost money, the people who took out the loans lost money. It was a complete disaster. But when Fidutam saw this issue, what we did is start to issue zero interest microloans, which is why we're actually issuing out such small amounts of capital. It's really important that we look to the past to inform what we're doing in the present. And so in order to do that, we look at existing companies to ensure that we're not replicating these exact same mistakes. And so Fidutam is impossible to cause predatory loans or any sort of debt because it's a zero interest microloan. So you might be wondering how we make money, and I'll get to that in a second. And then if we look at cryptocurrency, we all know that cryptocurrency is extremely volatile. There's almost very few solutions that have actually been successfully deployed in underserved communities. Crypto is, as of right now, not the best way of democratizing access to capital in low-income communities, largely due to its volatility. And so users who use or invest in crypto who already don't have a significant amount of capital to work with end up losing a really significant amount of money. And beyond that, there's a huge environmental cost of crypto. And there's also a large amount of computational tractability that a community needs to have and have access to in order for their solution to be implemented. Then if we look at government or organizations and big bank interventions, this has actually been a relatively unsuccessful market for government and big banks because what they try to do is offer prepaid debit cards and loans, but it's essentially like giving an unbanked person a gift card, which we know will first not get them a bank account, but second of all, will give them only a very transient amount of capital to work with that is very unlikely to help them mobilize upward. Then finally, we have agent-based banking. This actually looks at one of the sort of 3 tenets of that responsible development framework that I mentioned, where you're having a presence on ground and they facilitate a lot of the movement of money that's happening sort of with these communities directly. But the only problem is that a lot of the agents that were being deployed actually didn't have proper training, and also there was a lot of low trust amongst the community, and therefore this solution failed as well. So when you look at all 4 of these solutions, you find that Fidutom took each of these areas and started to capitalize on these problems and build out a solution to each of them, which was then coalesced into our final version, as you saw before. And one of the models that I actually showed was a physical prototype that we're currently developing, which will allow users without phones to still interact with our application. We're using 3D printing and actually laser cutting, so a lot of similar technologies to what some of the FAB students were doing, and we're deploying it as a camera-based sort of device that users can use to register with our application and again gain access to the microloans and digital identities. So we have these 4 problems in mind, and how do we make money? We've capitalized on these 4 problems, but now how do we actually work to keep ourselves financially sustainable? Well, first, as a public benefit corporation, the thing we didn't want to do is siphon away funds from already vulnerable communities. So instead of doing that, we partnered with financial institutions at scale. So what this means is that we actually work directly with financial institutions to have our users graduate from using our SIM-based application to opening up an account with these formal banks. So we're systemically solving this problem of unbanking by having users use Fidutom's application, mobilize upward, and they can then open a bank account. Meaning that we make money, we don't take any money from unbanked communities, and these financial institutions also make money. Because think about it, Fidutom is like a filter. We're giving them some of the best of the unbanked community. They have digital ID, they have access to finances, and they have a proven capacity to be able to mobilize upward off of a very small amount of capital. And so now we're working on piloting this. We're in talks and partnership with organizations like Prudential, like 1T.org of the World Economic Forum, World Bank Group, and SoftBank, amongst others, in order to really push this forward and be able to deploy this solution. So more broadly, I want to return back to this idea of responsible technology. I think Fidutom is an excellent use case of what happens when we work directly with communities in order to deploy solutions effectively. Fidutom actually has not been around for very long. We've only been around for, I'd say, a year and a half now in terms of deploying our actual solution, but we took around half a year for our ideation of our solution. I know that a lot of times being first to market is one of the big priorities of startups and organizations, but sometimes being best to market is better. If you take the time to actually understand the community, to actually deploy the technology properly, you'll find that there's a much better value add that you're going to create. And beyond that, more organizations will be willing to back, fund, and support your solution because of the fact that there's a proven level of efficacy. So what we want to do now is really start partnering with large-scale organizations. The FAB Foundation, for example, we can have on-ground contact points at different FAB labs where we can fabricate our SIM cards or have our application deployed to a variety of different countries, and they will essentially serve as agents because they'll be within their communities, they'll be born in their communities, and they'll know exactly how to roll out the solution effectively. But beyond that, as I mentioned, Fidutom isn't just this one product. It's now a collective. What we're doing is we're the first youth advocacy organization focused on responsible technology and AI from this technical perspective. We have thousands of students now working on policy, on technical, and on growth to allow us to implement our solutions to a broader network, but also to coordinate product development with the Google, with the Anthropics, with the OpenAIs, to ensure that they're not making the same mistakes that we've seen so much in the past. A lot of technology has hidden costs that we're not aware of. For example, ChatGPT is actually being upheld by people in Kenya who are being paid less than $5 an hour to audit their software. So imagine if more AI companies spur out, they're using this very similar outsourcing model, how many people will be exploited? How big of a human rights violation will AI become? It's such a huge problem when we're pumping in technology, when we're pumping in funding to technology that isn't socially responsive, that doesn't take care of the community, and that doesn't consider this aspect of responsibility. And then when we move to general purpose AI, blockchain, digital transformations, if we don't make these considerations now, imagine what the future is going to look like. Not only will technology be isolated and siloed for the elite, but it also means that a significant portion of the population will be shut out from this digital transformation. Just think about it. A lot of the people right now who are at the forefront of digital identification or able to work with this type of technology are the wealthy or people who are working directly in industry, meaning that the last people to get digital ID will be people like Alice, will be people on the ground, will be people who need it the most. And so Fidutom is working on ushering and stewarding this digital transformation right now in the present, which is why we're so excited to see countries like Bhutan passing legislation that helps us scale digital identities, that allows it to be implemented on a much broader scale and to a broader audience, and that generalizes the use of technology, because after all, that's what we're all here working towards, this idea of technology for all, not technology for some, not technology for those who are seen the most, but technology that is actually and truly universal. So to harken back to this idea of Alice, this story of Alice, this concept of Alice, we no longer want her to be defined by her name, defined as asset limited, income constrained, but employed. But instead, with Fidutom and with people like you, she can be asset loaded, income comfortable, and employed. And so that is the future that Fidutom is working towards, and we hope that you'll join us in our journey. So thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
That was really inspiring from Okil's way. Do we have any questions from him? Yep.
Are you a financial institution or are you a technology institution? What do you view yourself as?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're really a technology institution more broadly. And so that's the reason why we've registered as a public benefit corporation, because the vision is that this product won't be our last product. It's just one of many things that we plan to be able to pump out. And so by marketing ourselves and establishing ourselves as more of a tech institution, we're poised for the future to continue our advocacy efforts, but also deploy more technology.
Okay. Just quickly, could you go over again how you give 0% loan, but you're talking about your partners? Are they equity partner to you? Are they grant makers to you? What's the risk they're taking? What's the risk you're taking as you're making 0% loan? Can you just explain that?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. So essentially what's happening here with Fidutom is our loans are zero interest, payable back within a year, $50 to $100. So per user, we're not necessarily assuming that much risk, right? If we have, say, a $200,000 budget, we can issue thousands of microloans before we run out of capital, and we've seen a very successful repayment rate. But then what happens is that we partner with these financial institutions. They pay us a flat fee. So what we're working with right now is after we finish our paid pilots, our flat fee is going to be around $100,000 and then $300 per new user that graduates from Fidutom to opening up an account with these formal institutions. And formal institutions actually pay customer acquisition costs of upwards of $700 for large-scale financial institutions. It can be even more than that. And so essentially what we're doing is they're assuming a level of risk by paying us with the expectation that we'll bring them customers. The risk we're assuming is that, well, we have to bring them customers and ensure that Fidutom's application helps people mobilize upward. But the mutual benefit here is that these users will now be able to open up formal accounts. So we're solving the problem of unbanking. But also, these financial institutions are going to be making a significantly higher return on investment per user that Fidutom brings in, because we have people who are starting up businesses when they're homeless, when they don't even have a home. We're having people who have just gotten access to digital identity, yet are navigating the consumer landscape like professionals. There's so much wealth and so much power in underserved communities. So imagine if we brought these people from $50 to $100 microloans that are interspersed over a period of time and gave them the capital that a savings account or any type of account with a formal bank would give them. They would make so many returns, not only for themselves, but for financial institutions as well. And we calculate that the exclusion of the unbanked community has left trillions and trillions of dollars in economic value being lost. So imagine if we bring that to the masses. It could be world-changing.
Okay, so good to see you again. Amazing presentation. My name is Adam, and I teach law to people that are just a little bit older than you. Do you know where I'm going to go with this question?
Maybe.
I want to open it wide open for you to teach us about what it's like to be 17 years old. You're 17, right? And the financial industry is regulated very heavily in some countries, like the United States, where you've set up. Can you teach us, can you set up a financial institution or make loans as a 17-year-old? Where has the regulatory framework been friendliest to you? Where has it been flexible? Could you give us any tips if you're Bhutanese or whether you're from anywhere, Mexico, there are people from all over the world. What have you learned about dealing with regulators? Where are they flexible? Are there role models in case there are regulators in the room? Anything that you want to tell us about dealing with regulators and the legal landscape when you're in a highly regulated industry and you're not even 18 yet.
Yeah, no, great question. So I think I'll answer this in a variety of parts, and I'll preface by saying that I'm really grateful that we have an international presence and that other countries exist and are very engaged in this effort, because the US's regulatory landscape is very, very difficult to navigate, especially when it comes to serving underserved communities or deploying capital to individuals. It is a very difficult and rocky road to cross. That being said, one of the biggest things we've been doing is actually sort of this legislative advocacy, where we do drop-in meetings or DC Weeks of Action, where we talk to a variety of different offices, support them in their goals, and also talk about what types of legislation can we push forward that will make Fidutom more easily implementable on ground. In terms of implementing right now, what we do is we coordinate with economic ministries, we speak to them directly and say, hey, this can be sort of turned as a type of donation to your country for the furtherance of your communities on ground. And a lot of times in other countries such as Nigeria, they have city-based economic ministries, so you can coordinate with them directly. And if you explain the value that you're adding, you explain that, you know, we're not siphoning any money from the community, we're deploying capital directly to individuals, it actually is a lot easier for them to say, okay, we can view this as sort of a community donation, if you will. And then connecting them to financial institutions is another hurdle to cross, because, you know, a lot of financial institutions want to make sure that they're maximizing profit. They're corporations after all, and they want to make the most money as possible. And so we have to have proofs of concept every single time when we're approaching a new or potential partner that these people have been able to mobilize upward. It's this amount of time. We're getting average 50% profit margins or higher for our users. That's something that's really, really important when it comes to approaching financial institutions. And then beyond that, more broadly on this idea of responsible technology, like I mentioned, we're doing political advocacy on both sides of the aisle, but as we know, there's currently no enforceable policy or framework when it comes to regulating AI or blockchain-based solutions. In fact, most of the regulation has been sort of blanket banning regulation that is, as we know, very highly ineffective. And so one thing we've really been pushing for, especially in the US, is for Majority Leader Schumer to start implementing his framework more broadly, give us more specifics, really deploy that directly. And so it's been great to see that he is sort of this AI general, if you will, and he has all of his lieutenants sort of working towards developing frameworks and deploying them. But a huge part of it is having a presence at legislative hearings, having a presence in Senate and Congress, really working together and creating the synergistic relationship between government, between public sector, and between or government and public sector, and between private sector as well. So a lot of it actually does deal with advocacy, and I think as a young person, that's one of the easiest ways to penetrate government, is come from the perspective as a concerned citizen rather than a business magnate who has all of these ideas and all of these sort of personal interests that they want to forward. And it becomes a lot easier for, say, hey, we want to implement digital identification. Can we do this on a smaller scale? Right now in the US, we've been keeping it contained in cities and in private pilots so that we're able to do it legally. Yeah, so right now we didn't need to license as a financial institution, largely because we're actually not deploying as a financial institution. If you think about it, we're not giving them credit cards or giving them accounts or holdings. Instead, we're just providing them with small amount of capitals akin to a donation. And so one thing I didn't mention that we do is we actually work with nonprofits. We give them the capital and they sort of give it out to members of the nonprofit that are being supported. And so this is an excellent sort of method. It's like having a proxy, or really circumlocuting all of the regulatory sort of safeguards and guardrails that we have to navigate to be able to deploy capital in communities effectively.
So your answer to this may be no, there hasn't been because of your age, but I'm curious about whether you've had any setbacks or failures along the way that have influenced your approach.
Yes, definitely. So funny story, actually. Fidutom was started, there's this competition called Distributive Education Clubs of America. It's like this big business competition in the States for young people. And my best friend and I, we did the competition in ninth grade and got, I think, 6th place, which was not good enough to qualify for internationals. And so the day we got back, we started working on this new idea, which was called Fidutom. But it was actually a credit card security business. It had nothing to do with this. It had nothing to do with responsible tech. And we were really focused on just creating something that would be really profitable, providing, I think it was like digital cards that would be able to change their numbers. And so that way, you know, there wouldn't be as many security concerns when it comes to a malicious actor coming and intercepting your information. It was an interesting idea. And we ended up winning internationals that year. And so after that, we were like, okay, this can be a real business. And we started going through the process. We realized that we would actually have to register as some sort of financial institution or payment service provider, which was a hurdle in itself. And then because we were so young and trying to sort of broaden our reach and gain visibility, we started getting scammed by a variety of different organizations. There was a Silicon Valley organization who reached out to us, and their proposition was wild. It was like, you give us 45K and we'll give you 600, which obviously anyone in the room knows that doesn't make any type of sense. But sort of encountering those things and failing with our solution completely made us realize that, hey, there's a new opportunity, a way to pivot that not only benefits people, but that is actually financially sustainable and something that people will get behind. And it was really interesting. I ended up actually recruiting an entire team for that initial idea. We had to let all of them go, including one of my best friends, and it was just a very difficult hurdle to get over. And so now that Fidutom has sort of reestablished itself, really deployed something meaningful, and is now sort of restarting this idea of recruiting students once again, it's a very full circle moment to me to see how many students, our initial team was like 20, and that was the team we had to let go of. Now having 1,300 students in one singular Slack channel, it's unbelievable to me, and it really demonstrates the importance of perseverance and creativity when it comes to innovation or anything more generally. And even beyond that, I think broadening our scope and our focus has also paid dividends in a variety of ways, because I'm a huge proponent of this idea of being intersectional. Everything sort of interlaces with one another. Racial injustice interlaces with financial injustice, which interlaces with AI ethics, which interlaces with legislation that's being deployed. And so by working at all sort of aspects of that spectrum at all levels of government, we can really affect some serious change. So definitely hurdles encountered, but grateful for all of them.
We still have around 10 minutes, so do you guys have any questions? Okay, we have someone further back.
Thank you very much. My name is Chawang. I come from a think tank. Just to perhaps build on the earlier two questions on regulations and also on setbacks. I mean, you are so young and seem to be doing already quite a lot. And I'm not very sure how familiar you are with the policy landscape in Bhutan, but as a young entrepreneur, from your experience, what do you think the government can do on a proactive basis to promote and support people like yourself? As you can see, there are many young Bhutanese in the hall, and I'm sure all of them want to do something like you know, something big in their lives, but they also need the necessary support in terms of, you know, policy or capacity building or funds or whatever from the government. So from your experience, what do you think can the government do proactive basis? Like this FAB thing is a great example, I think, to promote young entrepreneurs. What other things you think a government can do to support aspiring entrepreneurs?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think really being symbiotic with students that want to deploy solutions is very important. As I mentioned, you know, we have a political arm, and we're fortunate that some of these governmental groups and organizations have been willing to be able to meet with us, whether it be via Zoom or in drop-in meetings. But I think having more of that is really important. At least in the States, government feels very inaccessible, and so that is a huge sort of landmark that you have to traverse if you're going to be deploying any sort of solution, especially if you want it to be implemented on a wide scale. And beyond that, you know, with the support of government, it makes it a lot easier for you to approach actors with large amounts of capital and actors who are going to be most likely the majority holders of these types of solutions being deployed. And so I think government getting behind solutions more often can be really helpful and really effective. I know in the US, you know, accepting government funding can be a slippery slope because sometimes that means you have to align with their personal views if it's like a partisan sort of coalition that you're working with or coordinating with. It can even then be more difficult, especially when it comes to having a team that's very diverse, that has a variety of different views. It can spark internal controversy. But I think sometimes governments don't even have to give out funding. They can coordinate with existing sort of foundations or philanthropic investors or even VCs to be able to bridge this gap between entrepreneurs and the funding sector. So I think definitely coordinating with young people and young entrepreneurs more directly is really, really important. And beyond that, listening to their concerns when they want new acts to be passed or implemented. I can give you an example of what happens when this communication doesn't happen. In the United States, you know, the last piece of legislation that was passed on social media and youth, which as we know is a very difficult problem, was passed well before the advent of digital applications or even the popularization of smartphones. So when youth voices are not considered or weighted in policy-making decisions, it can have some pretty catastrophic impacts. And now, you know, we see this frenzied effort on the side of the US government to start implementing solutions, which is a positive, but it's also negative that they didn't act fast enough. So definitely coordinating with, communicating with, having presence at conferences as well, just being a visible actor in a party, not this governmental body that's sort of floating above our heads, can be really, really helpful. And coordinating with incumbents and stakeholders on legislation as well, hosting government roundtables, working directly with civil society and other groups to make sure that the policies that we're pushing, things that are being passed into Congress, bills that are being transformed into acts, really are for the people and in the benefit of the people and uphold democratic/humanistic values.
Okay, I guess that's it. Okay, Zoe, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Neil, Sherry, the FAB Foundation, MIT team for bringing him. Oh, just take this. Okizwe has been really inspiring, not just for the school students, but for all the entrepreneurs in Bhutan. And we'd really like to thank the MIT at CBA at MIT and the FAB Foundation team for having him here. He's been interacting with a lot of school students, and a lot of school students have told all of us that they were really inspired by what Okizwe has done in his life, and he's just 17 years old. So next up, we have Dr. Leah Haynes, if you are here. Okay. So she'll be talking about 2 bits on STEAM-powered creativity for kids, classrooms, and community. Please give it up for Dr. Leah Haynes.
Good morning. I am both honored and humbled to be up here following such a brilliant young man who gives hope to the future of what we have to look forward to. Because my generation and everyone under me is leaving that generation with a lot of issues to solve. So it's really wonderful to see someone with great ideas and ethics and compassion. So bravo and thank you. And everyone that I've seen on this stage for the last few days has really inspired me, and I've learned so much. So let's see this as a bit of a case study on sustainability and maybe even a cautionary tale from time to time. This is our mission, vision, and values. And the reason I wanted to show you this is you'll see through a thread throughout this. Under our values, this was part of a conversation yesterday, the day before. Learning happens everywhere all the time. It doesn't matter if we're intending to teach or not. A first-person shooter game is teaching something to the students that are using it and the children that are using it. So being intentional about teaching is such a value. But the second one there, radical niceness and building each other up, There are 6 directors in the company, 4 women, 2 men. One of the guys said, we can't keep that. That's like so soft. It makes us look silly. And he was outvoted. And I'm so happy that we kept it because it is an underpinning of the way we deal with each other and the way we deal with the students that we work with and with the teachers that we work with. And this is, you know, we take playful learning very seriously. So under the big top 4, nonprofits came together. And this is one of the areas of financial sustainability that has really worked for us. So Trash for Teaching is where I was when 2-Bit Circus came along. And it was an impossible name to work with. It was exactly what we did. We took manufacturers, and we still do it. We take manufacturers' clean waste, and we use it in education. But nobody wants trash on the dais, and it was really hard to get donations from the corporate world because even though they say that they are philanthropic wings of the corporation, yes, they are philanthropic wings of the corporation, but they also want whatever they give money to reflect well on them, and trash didn't do it for them. Imagination.org is a nonprofit that grew out of a 10-minute video on YouTube that you will never regret the 10 minutes you spend watching it if you take the time. It's called Kane's Arcade, and it's about a 9-year-old boy who was bored to tears all summer going to work with his dad who owned a junkyard in South Central LA. And this little guy took what was available, cardboard, tape, and a magic marker, and he created this very elaborate arcade. It was out there all summer. He was sweeping the sidewalk up, and he was inviting people to play it. No adult engaged with him in the arcade. When he told his friends at school that he'd built it, they all said, "Ah, sure you did." Nobody believed him. So along came a documentary filmmaker who was down on his luck because he was buying a handle for his broke-down Toyota Corolla. He sees this kid, he engages, he spends an hour playing all the games with the young boy, and then he goes to the dad and asks if he can make the documentary. It went viral in 2012. They raised $250,000 for Kane's Educational Scholarship and enough money to start this nonprofit. Unfortunately, the executive director that the founder hired used the organization as his own piggy bank, which is a real problem, not just in large-scale businesses, but it's so offensive to me when it happens in nonprofits. The IRS caught on. They were in a lot of trouble. We took them on because their mission was aligned with ours. They were in financial trouble. We were fairly stable. So, and then LA Makerspace. One more thing about Imagination.org. Once we took them on, Vans Shoes came to us because Imagination is a great name to brand with your corporate donation. And we were the inaugural partner for their checkerboard day. And they gave us a $1 million unrestricted grant, which was the largest we'd ever received. And that's how we survived the pandemic. LA Makerspace, contrary to their name, they never had a makerspace. They did pop-up makerspaces at events and libraries and did workshops. And they were just this fabulous group. They were also in a little bit of financial trouble. They joined us. And the STEAM Carnival is just one of my favorite parts of this. STEAM Carnival is a replacement for the science fair. And the idea is that the science fair gets the kids who are already excited about science. And a carnival can get all the kids and then get them excited about science. I walked in, my granddaughter was 6 when we went to the first STEAM Carnival. And we walked in, there's a Tesla coil on stage. There's a young woman playing a hot pink violin that she made in a 3D printer. And the kids who experienced it, their lives were changed. So they did one in San Francisco and one in San Pedro. And then they decided they weren't going to do them anymore. So I went to them and said, we have to do them. And I asked the founder of the STEAM Carnival program was Brent Bushnell, the oldest son of Nolan Bushnell. So everybody over 50 blames Nolan for the fact that their kids wouldn't do homework, and everybody under 50 loves Nolan because he invented the first video game and the founder of Atari. Brent joined the board at Trash for Teaching, and then a couple of years later, his CFO told me he was gonna resign from the board, and I was devastated. He said he was resigning because he wanted to offer me the job of executive director of the Two-Bit Circus Foundation, which sounded so exciting to me, but I was only 2 years at Trash for Teaching, and I had made a lot of changes, and it wasn't that they couldn't do it without me, but they couldn't do it yet without me. So I called Brent in the morning. I said, if this is true, the rumor that I heard, how about I bring the whole staff and everything that we do, and we become the Two-Bit Circus Foundation, because Trash for Teaching was a really easy name to leave behind. We still keep it because we do the gathering of the manufacturer's clean waste, but that's how the organization was born. It doesn't want to move. Is there? It may be operator error, but I'm using the same arrow and it's not going anywhere. Oh, wonderful. So this is our metrics so far. So through imagination.org, we have creativity chapters around the world, and we do an international cardboard challenge where kids make something out of cardboard, send us a little video of it. So over 2 million kids have taken part in that. The maker spaces, that's something that Trash for Teaching was doing when we came together. And we had built 2 the first year, and then we did 6, and most of the last 2-3 years, we built 30 to 40 a year. And 6 weeks before the end of the school year, which means that all the schools are looking at what budget they have left in America, and if they don't spend it, it goes back to the district. We actually got an order for 88 STEAM labs that had to be built and delivered in 6 weeks. And I have this tiny team of really dedicated, I'm going to show you a staff slide. They managed to do it, and it was just a miracle that they got it done, but they worked 7-day weeks and 12-hour days for 6 weeks to do it. And it's not because they wanted, well, I'm sure they liked the overtime money, but the whole team is so mission-driven that they were willing to jump in. 900 tons of material that we've taken out of the waste stream and put into the hands of young inventors. And that is part of, the most exciting thing for me is that those kids start to see themselves as inventors, and I'm sure you see it in your FAB labs. Our labs are, you'll see in a couple of minutes a little bit more about that, but like analog tools and random material from that manufacturer's waste stream. And 16,540 workshops, and I think I was at most of them. So these are the kinds of things that we do. We put together the little maker space. I'll show you another picture in a bit. But and our curriculum development team is led by a high school physics teacher who just takes everything he would be teaching in high school physics and then brings it down to a 2nd grade level and a 3rd grade level and a 4th grade level and just starts the kids where they are. Yeah, so this is the environmental side of what we do. So this is what the STEAM lab looks like when we put it at the back of a school room. And we do have like a phase 2 where we have some fabrication equipment starting to go in. I can't wait for the Fab in a Box to be ready because we have a lot of schools ready for that. The maker carts. And NASA, one of their educators came to us and asked us to put this cart together for them to take out for the NASA's BEST program, and then they stopped doing the NASA's BEST program. They no longer send educators out, but they kept a link on their website, so we still are sending out the NASA's carts and the NASA's BEST program that we wrote a book for. And this is our sustainable STEAM material. So when the kids make something in their makerspace that doesn't work or falls apart, it's not been expensive. And I think I misspoke yesterday or Tuesday when I said it sort of sounded like I was putting down the expensive robotics kits, and I really am not. It's just that the kids that we work with don't have access to that. So what can we give them that, and most of the kids who do have access to that also have access to things that teach them problem solving and creative and critical thinking, and our kids don't have exposure to those things. So that's what the labs have become, and the environmental sustainability part is really important to us. So everything we send out is majority upcycled material. And then the environmental stewardship that we are working with these kids. When we do a workshop with the kids, we'll bring a bag of the random material and ask them to make a car of the future, and then we put a little paper cup on the table and say at the end of the day, all the trash has to fit into this little cup. So if they use something and it doesn't quite work, they can take it apart, put it back in the bins. We put mock price tags on the bins so that the teacher can add a budget to the project and give the kids, okay, you have to make your car for under $50. Or whatever, if it's a high school group, then it'll be a little, higher budget and different prices on the equipment. And our professional development, I'm going to brag for just a minute about this because it's just taken such a turn. We usually go to a school at a time to get them ready to use their STEAM lab, but because that huge number were all ordered at the end of the school year and the professional development also had to be delivered before the end of June, we couldn't make it to all the schools, so we had them all come to us together. We had 225 teachers, and they came in, it was the day after the kids left school, and they all looked a little like this, like, okay, now what? And we started by telling them, you are our rock stars. We are here. This is not a one and done. We don't want you just to come, do this with us for the next 2 days, and then go off. We want to be your partners. And what we did was we made them the students and we modeled the teachers' behavior. And so for 2 days, they went from workshop to workshop, and we didn't give any instructions, which is what we asked them to do. And we gave them a prompt, like, okay, here we're going to make a working headset. So they take a speaker apart to see how it works, and then they make a working headset, which, by the way, we did with, it's an AP Physics project. We did it with 11 to 13-year-old kids at a summer camp, and they all left at the end of 2 weeks with a working headset. They gave a pitch to their parents about why it should be made. They all see themselves as young entrepreneurs as a result of that. They also will remember what they did, and they'll remember how sound was transmitted, because some of them got it right away, and they worked with the other students to help them get it. And when they all managed to have a working headset, they knew how sound was transmitted. We interviewed them all too, and they sounded a lot like the professor who first taught us how to do it. So I did talk about the curriculum development for, these are the competitions that we've done, and the creativity chapters. They grew out of the Kane's Arcade video. I guess what's not on here that I wanted to talk to you about is we have a junior board. And our junior board, Kane is still on our junior board, has been now for 3 years, and he's graduating from Cal State Dominguez Hills next spring with an undergrad degree in entrepreneurship. And two boys named the Lee brothers, Connor and Bauer Lee, are also on there with us. Connor and Bauer, when they were 9 and 11, saw Kane's Arcade, and they started building superheroes out of cardboard. And they told me that they had to teach themselves physics, because after the first few months, the cardboard superheroes would start. And if you go online and look up cardboard superheroes, they've started a little nonprofit. It's amazing. They have like huge superheroes made out of cardboard, and they took what Kane did and just elevated it to an unbelievable state. They were the youngest people to ever speak at Comic-Con, and they did a presentation and a workshop there. And then there are 6 young people, and our junior board are the ones that give us feedback on everything we're about to do with students. And sometimes they're brutal. Sometimes it's like, you might have put a lot of work into that, but nobody cares. So we really rely on their input, and we've grown with that. And also our board, this is my first nonprofit. I came from the for-profit world. I'm a late bloomer at everything. I did my graduate degrees in my 50s. And when I first took over at Trash for Teaching, I inherited a board. Half of them were really, okay. And the other half were like, we've never done that before. And they were not willing to try anything new. They also didn't help with any of the fundraising. So on the financial front, we work with corporations, and we will build programs that honor what they're trying to do, as long as it still honors what we're trying to do with students. And I think on the financial sustainability side, finding other nonprofits that have similar missions and don't conflict with what you're doing. The world doesn't need one more nonprofit. It needs nonprofits that can work together, and you'll build your reputation and have an easier time talking to sponsors. And a good example is the $1 million that came to us through imagination.org. Two-Bit Circus Foundation's too clunky a name for the Vans people to get excited about putting it on their first card checkerboard day. And LA Makerspace were offered a grant that if they had been on their own, they wouldn't have been offered, or they wouldn't have been able to accept. And it was a $300,000 grant to build something I've talked to several people here about. It's called Coding Crew, and it's a program that teaches kids how to teach other kids how to code. Once those kids learn how to code, they can become little entrepreneurs with that, and they can charge in their community if they want. We give them all the assets they need to do the training, and I'm hoping to share it here with the Bhutan Department of Education and a few others that we've talked to. But it's free because we have a sponsor that can carry it. And then we charge in schools that have budget, and we have enough of a margin there that we can give it to the schools that don't have a budget. And I remember earlier someone mentioned, like, sometimes the money is coming from a place that is difficult to say no to, but you need to. And I've also struggled with that. When I first came into Trash for Teaching, I had just finished my dissertation, which was a biographical study of Dr. Helen Caldecott, who is an anti-nuclear war, anti-nuclear power, anti-nuclear anything person. And we were getting money from Raytheon and IBM, or not IBM, sorry, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, and all of the war machines. And I was just like, oh, what if she looks at our website? What if I'll be devastated. But I made peace with it by saying to myself that where the money comes from is not as important as what I do with it once I have it. And so I feel like we cleaned up the money a bit and showed some value to children by using it. But if the money comes with restrictions and expectations that are not in line with your mission, then it is better to walk away from it than to try and make something fit. So if there are any questions, I'm open, and if there aren't, that's fine too.
Okay, do we have any questions from the floor? Okay.
Thank you. That fantastic presentation. I have a question regarding coding. Just alone in Colombia, the digital entrepreneurs of the country approached us at the university and said, 4 years ago when we first started talking with them, they needed 60,000 developers in the country that were not coming from anywhere. Now they need 95,000 developers in the country, just Colombia. This is a 50+ million inhabitant country. And so question is there a way to replicate these coder students that want to do something like this, maybe in a foreign country under certain conditions through the university where we can host them and shelter them and everything else that student needs, and also help them with the real bottleneck that is presented there, which is English, right? Our country, contrary to Bhutan, and we had an amazing invitation by the royal family a couple of nights ago, and we were explaining to them exactly what you're saying, how Bhutan has that advantage, that most people here have enough level of English that they can start coding. It's not the case in Colombia. Right. So if there are any pointers there, I'd appreciate them.
You're lucky that we also got a grant to, because we're in Southern California, we got a grant to translate it into Spanish. So we will have, probably by mid-fall, have a Spanish version. And I'm happy to give it to anyone who wants it. It's really, it's free, and it's designed to be remote, but we've done it in person, but we designed it to be remote during the pandemic, and have found it allows a lot more children to come, because if your parents can't drive you to the location and you miss a couple of classes, then you sort of fall behind. So we have the material and the program, and it's tried and true. So please see me after, and I will be happy to.
Thank you, Dr. Leah. Next up, we have Ms. Sherry Lassiter, who's the President CEO of FAB Foundation, and she'll be talking about some of the wonderful and lovely stories from the FAB network that has happened since for the last 1 year. So I'm sure this might keep all of you in awe. So up to okay. So I hand over the mic to Sherry Lassiter.
Here we go. Now we got it. So it's that time of year. It's time to celebrate Fab Love, and this is this represents, you know, milestones in people in our lives from the network. So Fab Love, we came up several years ago, and I have several partners in this fun little journey. Benno Juarez being one of them. I don't know if Benno's here this morning. Are you here, Benno? Benno? There you are. I see you. At any rate, Fab Love. We're going to first talk about a few of the marriages that happened this year. Going to celebrate some of our network. So first we have Nawal and Salman. Nawal Abdul Karim and Salman Faris from Cochin, India. Previously, she was a Cochin Fab Lab instructor and a student. They got married in March, and they met at a technical conference, and they share many common interests and ideology. But they decided to get married, and we want to say we want to say congratulations. What a wonderful thing to celebrate. We also have Vanessa Caicho, originally from Fab Lab Lima, and she has an iFurniture enterprise, so to speak, and Chris Del Giorgio from Philadelphia. They met during the pandemic and in 2021, and they decided to get married this last year. So congratulations to Vanessa and Chris. And that's actually all the weddings that got reported to me this year. So now we're going to go on to babies, Fab babies. Our first is Inez and Yosef, who are both at Fab Lab BCN, Barcelona. And their first baby, Per, was born this year. So congratulations, Inez and Yosef. We also have Irene and Eduardo, who is an instructor at Fab Lab Barcelona. Something's going on. Something must be in the water in Barcelona. That's all I can say. But at any rate, Barcelona, and they're celebrating their first baby, Bruno, who was born late last year. And then, of course, there's Anastasia and Greg, and I think you've seen them around. And Eol. Eol means God of the wind in Greek, and so Eol came into this world, I think in January, was it? Yeah, January. And of course, if you haven't seen him around, this is Eol, so I want you to recognize him. He's adorable. And this one surprised me. Well, not necessarily. Well, first of all, Fernando and Tom, you've seen Tom Vivanco. He's around here somewhere. Anyway, he's working with the Fab City team. Anyway, the most recent member of their family, Julia, arrived just in 2022. And so, congratulations to Tomas, wherever you are. And this is the one that knocked my socks off, and I didn't realize it until I saw the slide. But Kira and Tomas, who had Noelia exactly 1 year ago, and just in time for the Bali conference, a new baby on the way. So, yet to be named, but we have a new fabber coming very soon. So congratulations to Melissa Kira, and we're so excited for you. And then I'd like to take a different kind of turn to celebrate something a little different. So, in memoriam, the first thing I just want to note is that Gordon Moore passed into a transition this year. We in the network have always sort of followed or mirrored his sort of scaling model, which was doubling in size about every 18 months. And so he has passed, and honestly, in a way, because digital fabrication and the digitizing of our economy has become so pervasive, I think maybe our scaling model has passed too. So, but just to acknowledge Gordon Moore, because he was so important in as we grew. And then this one is very, very special, and I'm going to take a few minutes on this one. This is Mel King, and Mel King was a mentor to the network from the very beginning. He really taught me personally how to educate. He also he taught us as a community how to include community and how to work with community and how to co-create with community. He was an anchor in his community, in his own community. And I want to read you a little bit about him. He passed away, Melvin Herbert King Sr. He passed away on March 28th, peacefully in his home in Boston, Massachusetts. He was 94 years old, and so he was with us for a very long time. He was a community leader, a political activist, an author, a songwriter, a youth activist, and a retired educator. He was born in October of 1928 in Boston, and he is one of 11 children. He grew up in the New York streets section of Boston at the South End, and it's a vibrant and multi-ethnic neighborhood, but it was a neighborhood that was demolished due to urban renewal, which set him on a path towards social justice and urban renewal especially. He attended Boston Public Schools. He married Joyce. I don't know, some of you who are older in the network have been here a long time may have met his wife Joyce, who was also from the New York street section of Boston, and they took up residence in the South End. He taught math. He worked as a youth counselor for the United South End Settlements, where he became director of the 48 Rutland Street House, where he and his family lived. In 1967, he became the director of the New Urban League of Greater Boston, and he and his wife Joyce purchased a home down in South Boston and had 6 children there. Some of whom you know, Pamela used to run the FAB Foundation, and she is one of those great children. He's really well known for his role in fighting for affordable housing and services in the South End, particularly in the battle against commercial developers and the Boston Redevelopment Authority. In 1973, he has a very interesting political background. In 1973, King was elected to the Massachusetts House of Representatives for the 9th Suffolk District. In 1983, after vacating his seat in the House, he ran for the mayor of Boston. He won the primary, but he lost the general election to Raymond Flynn. He also established the Rainbow Coalition Party. He was the person that did that in our country, and later they joined with the Green Rainbow Party, which is an incredibly important political movement in the United States. And in 1985, he ran for Congress, not successfully. He was, from 1971 to 1996, he was an adjunct professor at MIT, and he established the Community Fellows Program at the Department of Urban Studies and Planning. And when he retired, I mean, it just keeps going. When he retired, he founded the South End Technology Center, which is how most of us know him, at Tent City, which was a joint venture between MIT and the Tent City Corporation to improve community and youth access to technology. He authored several books. He was a poet, and he wrote 2 poem books as a novel, Streets and Love is the Question and the Answer. And so I would just like to take a minute here love is the question and the answer. This is what I've always said, and this has sort of guided many of us through our work. And in recognition of that, I'd like for everybody to stand up. And he loved hugs, and so I'm going to ask you if it's appropriate for you culturally to turn around to someone around you and give them a big hug. And if it's not, I want you to just shake their hands and appreciate who they are. Thank you so much. We love and appreciate Mel. We miss Mel, and we will continue his legacy, I hope, through time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sherry. And next up, we have someone joining from the US. He's called Adam Stone, and he's an expert in finding experts from the network. So he'll be joining us online. Please hold on. And after that, yeah, we'll have some announcements and vaccines. If you have any questions, yeah, he'll be able to listen to you at some
Carolina in the United States. FAB Academy is amazing. Hello, I'm Adam Stone. I just graduated from FAB Academy at the Charlotte Latin Fab Lab in North Carolina in the United States. FAB Academy is amazing because it's a living body of knowledge that continuously evolves and grows as more students add documentation globally. But this rich knowledge base is not easily discoverable, which limits students' ability to build upon other people's work beyond their own lab's community. For example, during molding and casting week, I needed to fuse 2 pieces of wax, and I wasn't sure the best way to go about this. After asking several other students at my lab and my instructor whether they know of someone who's done something similar, I was eventually pointed to the documentation of a student at my lab who graduated last year, where she had a video of and great tips for using a heat gun to melt wax pieces together. Finding the documentation took a half day at the lab, but there was a good result and I solved the problem. We spend so much time documenting so that a huge amount of information is publicly available, but we use word of mouth to discover the information, and there's no framework for easily finding relevant documentation across the community. Students can only realistically find documentation of students who their lab mates know about, and it's not easy to find subject matter experts. This experience inspired me to create the Expert Network Map. Here's the website. Each student is represented by a node, and the size of a node corresponds to the number of times a student was referenced by other students about a topic. This is how I define expertise. A student who is referenced many times by other students about a topic is a topic expert. Nodes are colored by geographical region, and the visualization can be filtered by topic, by year, lab, and by minimum number of times referenced by other students to easily find useful documentation. Hovering over a student reveals their information, such as name, year, lab, and geographical region. Clicking on a student redirects the user to their documentation website. Students can use the visualization to find specific topic experts and reference their documentation. For example, if I'm struggling with computer-controlled cutting, I can filter the visualization to only that topic and see that this student was the most referenced by their peers. I can then click on them to navigate to their documentation on computer-controlled cutting. When starting the visualization, I hypothesized that looking at connections between peers and seeing which students are referenced by their peers the most in certain subject areas would create a crowd-informed expert map, highlighting useful documentation for specific topics. I actually went about creating the tool in 3 phases: data scraping, AI-powered topic classification, and visualization. I started by scraping the data. I wrote a Python script that uses the GitLab API to go through each student's repo back to 2018 and scan for links to another student's documentation. Then I needed a way to categorize each of the 32,477 links between students into a topic, like molding and casting or embedded programming. This proved to be one of the most difficult steps in creating this tool, because each student organizes their website differently and uses different words to describe a topic. To solve this problem, I decided to make an AI neural network that classifies links based on the 1,000 characters before and after the reference. First, I looked for keywords in the surrounding text, such as computer-aided design for Computer-Aided Design Week. I then took 13,000 of these keyword classified connections and trained a machine learning model off of them. I was able to increase the model's accuracy to 86.3% by tuning the hyperparameters of the neural network. Then the AI was able to sort all of the connections that did not have a keyword. Now that I had a database of tens of thousands of connections between students, I needed a way to map the experts on each topic. To achieve this, I used the JavaScript library D3.js to create an interactive visualization. On top of the ability to find topic experts, the visualization supports my initial hypothesis. There are extremely tight connections between students within each lab, and when students hear about a resource, they use it. For example, Adrian Torres' website has the largest number of connections, and Professor Gershenfeld mentions his great work on a number of weekly lectures. On the other hand, there's a lot of untapped knowledge, where experts in one lab are never discovered by other labs. There are many more use cases beyond expert mapping to gain information about other parts of the FAB program. I can imagine that this approach can be used in many other ways, such as parts planning across the world, supply chain coordination, final project categorization, and others. Having such a large dataset of students' documentation tagged by year, lab, and geographical region is a goldmine for new patterns to emerge. Here is a QR code to the Expert Network Map website. The website does not work on mobile, but you can save the link later to try on a computer using Chrome, not Safari. It can also be accessed by going to tinyurl.com/expertmap. There's a Mattermost channel dedicated to this map linked on the bottom of the website. Join the Mattermost channel if you're interested in learning more about the scraping, artificial intelligence, and visualization from a technical side, or building upon these tools and expanding them to other areas. If enough people join, we will have a technical deep dive later in the week, which will be coordinated on the Mattermost channel. Big thank you to Francisco Sanchez for all of his help and support, to Tom Dubik for his guidance, and all the great visualization feedback from Naughty Bremer.
Thank you, Adam. Can you hear us from Bhutan? Hi, Adam.
Yes.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. All good. So, do you have any questions for Adam here? Yeah. Do we have any questions? Okay, we have Mr. Peter.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. I have 2 questions. In how far I understood you are using the FAB Academy data of all these students, or am I wrong? This my first question is that indeed the set of users that you are processing? Is it extendable by other collections of users? Because the FAB Academy is a one-time snapshot of a student and not what he does 2 years later. And another thing that interests me is the FAB Lab involved? Is that identified in a unique way? Because we have other systems where also the problem is how to identify the Fab Lab in a unique way, so that you can combine data in an interesting way. Anyway, it would be very interesting to have this in fablabs.io. These were my questions and a comment.
Great. So if I heard that correctly, one is the data set currently of the Fab Academy students, and secondly, if there's room to expand the project to other data sets. Did I understand that correctly? Yes? Okay. Thank you. So to the first question, yes. Currently, the program scrapes all of the Fab Academy students' GitLab repos back to 2018, and that's the data set of the nodes that appear in the visualization. And I think there's great opportunity to expand this tool to other data sets by adjusting the scraping, the first portion of the program. And I think having this framework for mapping experts and connections between students has a lot of potential to demonstrate new patterns emerging in different areas.
Do we have any other questions?
Hi, that was amazing. Oh my God, I love the visualizations. I love how organic it looks, and it has a biomimicry vibe to it as well. Just want to know, how can we work with you? Because we are also looking at mapping an expert network back home in Southeast Asia, and then gradually growing super early, nothing close to what you've done. It's just very manual profiles, but it would be amazing to find a way to work with you. Yeah.
That sounds awesome. The best ways to work on expanding this project or connecting is through the Mattermost channel. It's on the, if you got the QR code, or you go to tinyurl.com/expertmap, on the bottom of the website, there is a link to the Mattermost channel, and we can either communicate through the Mattermost channel, or if enough people join the Mattermost channel and there's interest, we can have a longer, more technical session later in the week about the tool.
Thank you, Adam, for joining us all the way from the US and your time.
Great, thank you very much.
Next up, we have some announcements to make. So if we can have the announcement slide, please. Okay, so today from 3 p.m. till 7 p.m. we have 19 activities in the afternoon, 5 talks in the Yeti room, and there will be live streaming of sessions and 14 workshops. You can have curated workshop based on pillars. Here, for technology, we have it. Okay, I'll just go a little bit slower then. So for innovation, sustainability, community track, you can use this QR. For technology track, you can use this one. For economic opportunity, you can use this QR. And then finally, for youth and education, you can follow this track. Are we good? Okay. And then we also have the FAB23 track, sorry. So if you're interested to follow this track, you can scan this QR. So yes, other than that, we'll take a short break after this, after I'm done announcing. And after that, we have a very interesting panel. We'll be having the former Prime Minister of Bhutan, Dasho Tringtopge, the Acting Secretary of the GovTech Agency, the Chief Executive Officer, the Chief Technology Officer of DHI, and then we'll have Mr. Altador, who's Ambassador from the US to the Haiti. And then we also have one more, I think it's, Mr. John Smith, who is the director at the USAID. So we'll be having this session right after the Fabicize and the break. And please come join us at the Royal Textile Academy will be starting at 7:30, where Fabric Academy, whatever work they've done with the challenge and exhibition, will happen at the Royal Textile Academy. Everyone is welcome. We'll have drinks and food for you. So yeah, if you have the event badge, or if you know any friends who are interested in this, please ask them to join us. We'll be there waiting for you. And we'll also be celebrating entrepreneurs and Fabric Academy students. For entrepreneurs, the dinner is being funded by Just I Hub. And then we have the exhibition, which is open and free. No need to get admissions, and the museum will also be open. And at 9:30 p.m., we have a big private event at the Space 34. Space 34 is one of the best clubs that we have in Thimphu or in Bhutan. So if you really want to see the director of Fab City, Thomas Diaz, DJ, then you should come see us there. Anyway, thank you. Now I'm handing over the floor to the Mexico team for hosting the Fab event next year. Yeah, I think we're good. Yep. So please stand up. Yeah, that's it. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'd request everyone to be seated. We should be starting in 2 minutes from now. And if you have any friends outside the tent, please ask them to join the session as well. This is going to be a really interesting session. Everyone at the back, I'd like to request you to kindly be seated. Yes. So good afternoon, everyone. This is the most important event of the day. It's the Economic Opportunity Symposium, which will be moderated by Mr. Jacques-Adrien von Benneck. So Mr. Jacques here is the Chief Technology Officer for Druk Holding and Investments, DHI, and he's also the consultant for the Royal Government of Bhutan's GovTech department. Jacques comes here with over 32 years of experience across organizations and continents. So Jacques has an MBA in technology management and has worked for companies like Amazon Web Services, AWS, British Telecom, BHP, Billiton, Woodside Energy, Murdoch University, and the National Health Service in the UK, Australia, and Singapore. Anyway, please give a big round of applause for all the panel members present here. Now I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Jacques here.
Thank you, Chirag. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to what is a very hot Bhutan tent. So we hope that the discussions would at least make you forget about the heat. So I'd like to introduce you to a very esteemed panel that we've got here together. On my left, we have Dashut Tsering Topke. A lot of you probably know him. Tsering served as the leader of the opposition party in the National Assembly of Bhutan from 2008 to 2013, and he was the Prime Minister of Bhutan from 2013 to 2018. Tsering was the first civil servant actually that joined active politics, so he created many programs around policy management and to enhance technical education and vocational training in Bhutan. He's also volunteered in various areas, including the establishment of Bhutan's first youth center and forming the education staff welfare scheme. Tsering was the first official to resign from his work and take part in the country's transition to a parliamentary democracy. He was responsible for establishing the People's Democratic Party and is the registered political party in Bhutan, and he continues to serve as the president. Tsering is also well known for being a big advocate for gross national happiness, which I hope all of you know very well. His Majesty the King conferred the Royal Orange Scarf to Tsering Topke in 2008 while he was serving as the opposition leader, and again in 2013 when he was serving as the Prime Minister. Then next we have Jigme Tenzing on the other end of the corner. Jigme is the acting secretary for GovCheck, and he's been involved in the adoption of IT and government and helping define and shape the path of IT development in Bhutan since 2002. He has worked with the Bhutanese ICT fraternity to digitally transform public service, while also strengthening the domestic ICT industry, the telecommunications, and the space industry. He served on the board of Bhutan Telecom and is currently a board member here at Timbu Tech Park, where we are today. And he's also part of the Credit Information Bureau. He graduated from the University of Oregon. So we have a lot of USA-based people here on the panel today. So next we have Mr. John Smith-Streen. John is currently serving as the director for the Indo-Pacific Office of the USAID, based out of India and also working with Bhutan. They specifically focus on clean energy, resilience, trade, and connectivity. Previously, he served as the Economic Growth Office Director in Bangladesh and as the Deputy Mission Director in Karachi, Pakistan. From 2016 to 2018, he was in the Foreign Service. He joined USAID in 2000 and has now served in 7 missions around the world, including India, Jordan, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Kenya, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Prior to USAID, he worked for CARE, the Catholic Relief Service, the American Red Cross, the World Wildlife Fund for Nature, and the Peace Corps. So right next to me, we have Paul Altidor. Paul is currently working on a real estate investment business, but previously he was a visiting lecturer at MIT. Prior to the academic position, Paul served as the Haiti ambassador to the United States from 2012 to 2019. During his 7-year tenure, Paul implemented a series of initiatives aimed at shifting the perception of Haiti in the American consciousness from merely a disaster destination in need of charity. From frequent visits on the college campuses to regular appearances in the news media, Paul used a variety of platforms to engage the American public and redefine Haiti conversation. The Haiti embassy, under the leadership of Ambassador Altidore, became one of the most visited embassies in Washington, D.C., as it showcased Haiti's arts, cuisine, literature, and culture. During Paul's tenure, the Washington Post designated the Haitian embassy as the most welcoming embassy in Washington, D.C. Paul also worked as at the International Finance Corporation, which is the private sector arm of World Bank Group in Washington, D.C. Paul is a graduate from Boston College, and he earned an advanced degree from Massachusetts, so MIT. Then the last one we have is CEO Ushwal. So Ushwal is the CEO for DHI Group. Ushwal is also on the board with Jigme for Timputech Park, which is this facility. But Ushwal has the distinction of being the director of Innotech, which was the organization that created the Super Fab Lab and worked with Jigme Tenzing to actually create the whole Timputech Park. Ushwal he was a Fulbright Hubert Humphrey Research Fellow at MIT. So we have a lot of people from MIT, also Neil. So that's all the introductions. So what we're going to do is have a conversation about economic development. And then we'd like it to be a conversation. So if any point of time you have a question, please just raise your hand and we'll get a runner with a mic for you to ask the question. This is being live streamed on YouTube, so we're also collecting questions from YouTube. So we'll from time to time just make sure and ask those questions as well. So I'd actually like to start with a question for Paul. Fab Labs, and Bhutan, we have 6 Fab Labs, and we have a Super Fab Lab here in Timputech Park. These can become catalysts for economic growth and prosperity for people and communities in Bhutan and also around the world. I think that's the core purpose of them. What role do you think governments, aid agencies, philanthropic entities, and private sector can play in enabling these Fab Labs?
Thank you. There's something happening with this Fab Lab movement as far as the expansion that I witness happening right now within this community. And when I first spoke to Neil about this whole movement, and when I read his book, it's more than a movement. If you look at it, there's supposedly a revolution taking place in terms of the movement of digital fabrication. And one of the issues that I've been baffling with is our ability as a network, and more than a network of Fab Labs, but a network that's gonna facilitate this movement to really go from designing things to a major revolution that's really transforming lives. To me, that's my involvement in Fab Labs. That's why I'm interested in it. It's not just to build things to be cute or to make little projects in some lab somewhere, but the ability of what we're taking from some sophisticated lab at MIT or elsewhere and bring it down to where my grandmother sitting in a small village in Haiti can actually use this equipment, can use the tools to better their lives. Better their lives at the individual level, better their lives at the community level, better their lives at the country level, and hopefully at the world level. For that to happen, the technical part of it, I usually make the argument, we almost master it in the curve of this revolution taking place right now. So it's almost like Neil and others said, we can almost make anything. For that to happen, within that curve to get to the level where this is really a real revolution that really transforms lives, there's another piece to this, money. Because for these labs to survive, for this movement to actually take shape, survive, and eventually thrive, it needs financing. And for now, and I've been serving of the 2,500 labs around, I'm trying to see which one actually is surviving on their own. In other words, for this movement to survive right now, it requires a lot of capital. Not just a lot of capital, it requires a lot of intelligent capital. Here's what I mean by intelligent capital. I come from a country called Haiti, where there's a lot of aid money flowing into the country. But more often than not, they are not smart capital in my view. in part because sometimes they disrupt more, they do more damage than do more good. So in essence, I'm making the argument, aid agencies, governments, philanthropic entities, they are a critical piece of this movement. And I'm saying to especially the Fab Lab community and the makers out there, as much as we are focusing on making things, we need to push as much focus on how we become sustainable enough so that this movement can go from where it is right now to the transformation change we're hoping it actually does. We see the potential is there. I'm very confident it's gonna happen. But for that to happen, it requires government, it requires aid agencies, it requires philanthropic entities to be smarter, to be intelligent in how they're using their capital to fund this movement. And at times, I'm raising my concern sometimes, I don't see enough intelligent capital doing that. So I'm happy in being here in Bhutan, and I've been talking to the former Prime Minister and others. I see movement in that sense happening, but I think there needs to be a greater effort in ensuring that capital flows into this movement in real time, but again, real conversation taking place to ensure not just the survivability of this movement, but to make certain it thrives. And for it to thrive, when I'm making reference to intelligent capital, to ensure that, you know, folks are not competing for the same people to actually fund the same, because it's a sexy, it's a cute project of the day. And for that to happen, we need to ensure that the community of makers out there, we don't lose sight of our ability to connect with the financial world to ensure that there's money out there for this movement to survive. In my case, we're in the process of opening a lab in Haiti, and I'm going in the other direction. And I usually tell people I cannot spend my whole time writing proposal after proposal. So we're trying to create an endowment so that the entity can actually live on its own, and hopefully we can commercialize a piece of it so that we become sustainable. So next time USAID wants to give us some money, or in case they run out of money, or in case there's a new administration, they don't want to donate to some cause, to some project that today is sexy, or simply because the next big thing is no longer digital fabrication, the movement doesn't actually lose its foundation to survive simply because there's a lack of capital, or simply because there's a lack of interest. So I'm happy there's members of the government of Bhutan here and aid agencies, so we can really talk about this thing, because at the end of the day, I'm saying there's a real need for cohesive effort between governments, philanthropic entities, aid agencies, private sector, as well as the community of makers out there, so that this, again, goes from just a simple movement of making things to something that becomes transformational for society.
Thank you, Paul. There were so many good points in there, but I'm going to drag just one out. I think we should have a chat with John. As USAID, what do you feel are the opportunities for USAID as one of these agencies that do provide funding and assistance to help support Fab Labs and to help make Fab Labs in a country like Bhutan and the rest of the world more sustainable?
Thanks, Jack. I'd like to start by talking about my former professor, if I may. And one reason is because there are so many professors in the audience and so many that with past academic experience. But Dr. George Axon was my professor at Michigan State University, and he taught classes on international development and economic growth opportunities. And then he would go off to places like Nepal or India or Bhutan, and he'd work in these countries for a couple of years, and then he would come back to MSU. One of the most important things that Dr. Axon taught me was to be a student my entire life, to keep an open mind, to be humble in terms of your engagement. Now, why do I bring this up when we're talking about economic growth and financing for Fab Labs? I think partnerships are so important with respect to the whole question of sustainability for the Fab Labs, for economic growth opportunities. And partnerships are based on relationships. They're based on mutual respect, openness, transparency, moving forward with a shared vision. So when we try to structure new partnerships in USAID, I always try to keep that lesson in mind that we certainly don't have the answer. It's all about working across countries, among governments, linking in private sector, bringing in civil society, including academia, to try to craft solutions that are sustainable. I'll draw from some of our colleagues who spoke earlier. I was very impressed with Yogesh yesterday when he spoke about the Vigyan Ashram. And he said to make your institution sustainable, make sure that the community is involved. Make sure you are addressing true community needs. Okozue, who spoke this morning so articulately, said, from the start, ensure that the community is engaged in design and implementation of the institution, of the activity, of the app. So very important. The people must be involved, and we must be sure that we're addressing true needs. I'd like to speak about, in my opinion, 3 opportunities that I think the Fab Labs can engage in, that I know shows great potential for collaboration between India and Bhutan. And that's energy efficiency, green buildings or net zero buildings, and electric mobility. So I'll just give a couple of examples. USAID is currently partnering with the Ministry of Railways in India, the 4th largest rail system in the world, but the busiest in terms of number of passengers and freight hauled. We're promoting energy efficiency in all the rail stations across the country, 7,000 plus rail stations. The ministry is making the investment, but we're putting up the business plan for it. So we're talking about things like LED lighting, super efficient cooling, saving the energy that is produced. In India, like the United States, the majority of electricity is still produced by burning things. Bhutan is blessed by abundant hydropower. However, for the past 2 seasons, Bhutan had to buy electricity from India during the winter months. So energy efficiency is something that will be of growing importance in this country. 20 years ago, when I worked in India, the Confederation of Indian Industries came. This is the largest consortium of private sector in India. And they wanted to put up what they called a green business center. And so what USAID did is we facilitated a partnership between the U.S. Green Buildings Council. We brought them in to work with CII. That resulted in CII's Green Business Center, which has existed for 20 years as a showpiece for green technologies, as a training center. It is now evolving into a net zero center, but more importantly, it gave birth to a whole movement of green buildings throughout the country. So just through that partnership and those links. Electric mobility, there is tremendous potential in the United States, in India, and Bhutan for electric mobility. And in fact, if folks are interested, we're doing a workshop tomorrow in the Sloth Bear at 10 o'clock on electric mobility. Again, in terms of moving forward and reducing greenhouse gases and making better use of resources, we feel there's such potential here to expand the whole electric mobility. And all of this will drive economic growth. All of this will provide opportunities for youth to engage. All of this depends on new innovations and new technologies that can be developed in Bhutan, they can be developed in India, they can be developed in the United States. So the point is, by working together, we can facilitate these partnerships based on mutual trust, based on transparency, and drive economic opportunities in the future through engagement with Fab Labs as well. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'd like to take two of the things which you spoke about and maybe ask a question to Dashu Tsering. A lot of what you say mimics some of the projects and stuff that we're already working on, electric cars and these sort of things, green power. And the second point I want to take out is you specifically mentioned doing projects which solve problems for the everyday person on the streets. These shouldn't just be projects that are there to make money. So now my question to Dashu Tsering. We have, and probably everybody knows, we have the concept of gross national happiness, and it's been around, and it's at its heart, it's about making sure that we have happy people. But happiness isn't just about friendliness, it's about economically also being happy. It's about having the opportunity to work in the country. It's about having the skills to work in these sort of projects, which John mentioned. So do you think there is a place for us to focus and drive the country in this digital transformation without losing the concept of gross national happiness?
Thank you, Jacques. Good to be here. Quite easy to get woozed here. Okay. Good to see so many youth, Bhutanese youth. I have a little request. Going forward, seize every opportunity that comes your way, regardless of what it may be, including today. The front rows are empty, and then is dominated by our friends from abroad and well-wishers and supporters from abroad. And then we are occupying the back seats. Don't do that. Seize the opportunity. It's about economic opportunity. Okay, this is the way we are brought up. We are gentle people. We are compassionate people. We are kind. We are shy. We are not overbearing. Keep that, but balance it with seizing the opportunity with determination and be bold. This is my request to my young friends. So, gross national happiness and technology. How do we seize the opportunities that technology offers Bhutan and indeed the world as we move forward, as we transform lives and countries and society at large, without losing the ideals of gross national happiness? It is possible. It has to be possible, because gross national happiness does not mean that we ignore economic growth. It's just that economic growth must be sustainable, environmentally sustainable, financially sustainable. It should be distributive. Everybody should be involved. And then, of course, there's social inclusion and social progress and taking care of the environment and governance and culture and all that. It's not one or the other. It's not economic growth or gross national happiness. Bhutan has proved that it can be both. In fact, it does not have to be both, because economic growth is subsumed within gross national happiness. I'm not trying to imply that we have succeeded. In fact, our successes in gross national happiness may be leading to an ongoing crisis. A crisis that involves migration of Bhutanese. We are able to migrate because the successes of gross national happiness have allowed us to think liberally and to communicate with the world and be able to work anywhere in the world. While on the other hand, we've been very mindful of our economy and perhaps a bit too conservative. So the success of gross national happiness is creating a potential crisis which, if used well, can be an economic opportunity for Bhutan to take us to the next level of our GNH journey and development. GNH and technology and economy. It has to be relevant because the world is looking at that. The UN has Sustainable Development Goals, which are nothing but GNH, articulated differently. The Sustainable Development Goals, zero hunger, zero poverty, good health care, good education, gender equality, sustainable economic growth, decent jobs, climate action, sustainable infrastructure, vibrant institutions, good institutions that promote justice and peace, partnerships. This is GNH in a different language, in the UN language. But it's not just Bhutan, it's not just UN. Look at the corporate sector, B Corp. Look at the corporate sector and ESG. These are also, if not GNH, the different word, but ultimately trying to do business and trying to grow our economies in a balanced manner. And that includes technology. So I don't think it is one or the other. I think, if anything, technology and economic growth is subsumed within SDG goals or GNH or ESG or B Corp or any of the measurements that promote balanced development. And if it is not subsumed, it actually encourages it.
Thank you, Dr. Tsering. I want to take the point that you make that everything that we talk about in this forum is just GNH in the UN language, because one of the enablers that allow us to introduce technology into GNH is regulation and policy. And I know you're also a big advocate for making sure that we have the right policies and the right regulations. So I want to pass this question to Acting Secretary Jigme. GovTech is a newly created organization that came about at the beginning of this year because of this transformation that's happening in the Bhutan government. We are going through a transformation where we are not focusing on people's perceived skills, but their actual skills. We are trying to put the right people in the right positions where they can ensure that the effect of what their ministries are doing are felt at grassroots levels. So GovTech is a new organization, but you had an integral part to play in establishing Thimphu Tech Park and the Super Fab Lab. And I'd like to just hear what your view is of how government is going to continuously support this Fab Lab and the Super Fab Lab to make sure that it is sustainable, but also the history of how we got to this point, because what many of the people won't know is every time government invests in a project here, they have to adhere to a certain set of rules which are embodied in the GNH. So government cannot spend money on a project if they don't meet criteria from cross-national happiness. And so the Fab Lab is a result of actually meeting those. So Jigme, the question to you is, give us a little bit of the history of the Super Fab Lab and the Fab Labs and government's involvement and making sure that it's here, but it will also still support GNH.
Thanks, Jacques. So I think we can talk about the IT Park before the Super Fab Lab. So there was a growing concern with a growing educated youth population and not many jobs that were interesting for them. And there was definitely opportunity with the digital economy growing and this whole idea of business process outsourcing. The government then looked at the IT park as possibly a location where we could attract investors who might take advantage of that, opportunity in terms of our growing educated youth population. And I would say that we've achieved a fair bit of success. The idea was also not to look at it only as a place where we look at outsourcing, right? Because we cannot compete with the likes of India. I mean, India has cities with the potential to house BPOs with 10,000 youth. I mean, we would never be able to compete along those lines. It was a starting point, but at the same time, the idea was to establish an incubation center. The incubation center, the vision behind that was that we can actually get our bright, smart, intelligent youth who may not have wanted to work may not have wanted to join the civil service, may not have wanted to join any of the existing corporate employment opportunities that were there, but would rather use that innovative mind, that that idea of being able to create new opportunities, new digital ventures. We would create a space for that. So that's where we also established an incubation center. And I would say that we have been fairly successful. We've had quite a number of incubatees that have come out of the IT park and now are running successful businesses. And this naturally kind of evolves into the Super Fab Lab, because we are talking about digital fabrication, the ability to take digital innovation and combine it with the physical, being able to fabricate new things. And I think to add on to the question of the role of government, I really like the point that Paul made, that we need to think about investment. We need to think about smart capital. We need to think about smart investment. And obviously, we have our GNH principles. We will not invest in doing things that are wrong or bad for society, right? But there are opportunities for Bhutan because we are small. We are small, and therefore we have the potential to be extremely agile. We can do things that is very, very difficult for mature, established economies to think about. One example that we can talk about is the national digital identity. The government invested funds there because we wanted to solve the problem of online trust. We believe that providing services online is very much aligned with the principles of equity, with the principles of making it easy for citizens, empowering them. But one of the challenges that we've had with our digital strategy has always been, how do we legally identify someone that you can, trust online? And the approach that we took initially was to look at the solutions that were out there. In fact, we looked at what Estonia was doing, we looked at what Singapore was doing, and there was a lot of solutions on centralized digital identities. The concern there was people were afraid of the big brother, the possibility of government monitoring what every citizen was doing. And while it would have been very easy for us to take that approach. We could have bought a product and implemented it. We took a different path. We took a more difficult route. We invested in DHI, and we looked at developing a decentralized identity which empowers citizens to have control over their own information, a sort of a self-sovereign, identity framework. And I think similarly, the government can play a crucial role in investing in solving problems for society, at the same time using the ability to fabricate physical things that will help us overcome some of the challenges that Bhutan faces. I mean, we are already looking at drones. Bhutan, because of our geographic terrain, I'm sure all our visitors to Bhutan, you must have had a very winding, transportation experience. The cost of logistics is extremely high. To overcome these problems, there is opportunity for government to invest in these fab labs to create solutions that can leapfrog problems. And I think there are many opportunities. We are also looking at healthcare. Bhutan provides free healthcare for all our citizens. Our former Prime Minister was also just explaining to our colleagues here that we even pay for Bhutanese who we are not able to treat in Bhutan. We actually send them abroad at the cost of the government. And while we want to continue that, it is a growing expense. It's becoming more and more difficult to finance this. So we need to also rethink how do we look at healthcare. Can we think of focusing on proactive healthcare? Can we reduce the likelihood of somebody getting sick by looking at some of our medical data, our health data, our genetic data, to try and achieve better health outcomes without having to cure diseases, but rather making interventions early on so that you have better health outcomes, but it is much more cost effective. So I think I've been dragging on quite a bit, but I think there's a lot of opportunities where government can play a role, and we look forward to how we take this forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Chikami. I'd like to ask Ushwal the next question, and it relates to the different types of fab labs. So DHI as a company also invests and owns many different companies and across many different industries. And we have fab labs that mimic some of those, and the bio fab lab is one of them, and then we have the super fab lab here that allows a lot of the manufacturing stuff. We built the AI and the drone parts out of the super fab lab. So my question to you is, and I want to link it back to Paul's original red flag around financing, and Jigme has already spoken a little bit about how our government is investing in this park and the entrepreneurs that stay at this park. But DHI is one of the biggest employers in the country and also one of the biggest contributors to the government's revenue. So how do you see DHI helping to maintain and ensure that the different fab labs that are not on this premise actually also stay sustainable for the future?
Thank you, Jean. It's fascinating to hear from sustainability of fab labs to projects to the larger vision, how tech, GNH, economy can be put in one basket actually to the government regulations. My thoughts are, industry should push regulations. And what I mean by that is, let's get things done and we push the government to give regulations that are good for being relevant in the future. Now, why I wanted to mention that, and I think we have had an interesting situation in last 2 to 3 years where Secretary Jigme talked about national digital identity or drones. These are things we pushed for technology first and then pushed the government. The first government in the world today to actually pass an act on a self-sovereign framework. But then the technology was developed earlier, which was financed by the government, done at DHI. So I wanted to bring that context in terms of how actually the network of Fab Labs and the Super Fab Lab help in germinating these ideas of building technology, right? So we, in the Fab Labs or in the Super Labs, we do not look what is allowed by the government or not. We go ahead and solve a problem that matters. So that's one point I wanted to make, that this movement that you talked about, which is a world movement of Fab Labs around the world, is actually pushing every individual to be innovative and then pushing the governments to build congenial policies. Generally, the policies are always a step or 2 steps behind. But I think the movement of Fab Lab bring in this dimension beyond bringing in the creativity and the capability and the skills and solving the problems. So that's one of the things at the back of our mind. Before I go into directly answering the question about how to make it sustainable and eluding what Paul talked about, I also want to urge, as Excellency mentioned about seize the opportunity. I think from the Bhutan perspective, we need to be a global player in certain areas. And I think the movement that has happened has positioned us to be in being a global player. Why I say that, and what I want to urge everyone, is if we look at the computing power that's available from the 1990s to today. I mean, I can solve a 10 by 10 matrix here, right here, or 50 by 50 matrix right here. That's the capacity of computing power that we have, or even more. So my urge is, we don't need to be a technologist to solve problem, but there are tools in technology to solve problems, which is completely available in our hands. So I want to request again, huge number of students have been participating. I want to urge again, please seize the opportunity to solve problems with this exponential growth of computing power, with the exponential growth of technology that we see today. Now, bringing it back to the sustainability from DHI side, being a partner in growth in the economic development, bringing in Fab Lab in the equation, one of the things, a practical proposal that we have been working on is to see, for Fab Labs to be sustainable, for innovation to grow, for people to solve the right problems, we need to ensure that the financial sustainability is there. So one of the areas that we are working on is to build a multi-channel financing platform. So what I mean by that is the downwards of the multi-channel financing platforms are the innovation that happens in the labs, are the projects that happens in the lab. Probably that could be an NDI project that happens in the lab on a blockchain, we prototype. It could be a drone that happens in the lab. It could be a material science project or a research that happens in the lab. It could be another. And these would be the potential companies with values that would solve problems in the society, probably become $1 billion company. Now, Fab Lab provides that opportunity to do these research with a lean investment to potentially generate the next generation of industries, which feedbacks to our economy. Now, if we develop a platform in partnership, as you rightly talked about, with multi-channel input, it could be the venture capitalist on the top, it could be a philanthropist on the top, it could be an individual on the top, it could be USAID on that channel. It could be the government, as we have proven that with NDI investment, we have almost creating an industry that matters, industry with values like the NDI, which provides identity on the internet, giving back to the economy. So our way forward, in one of the ways to look at, is how do we create this multi-channel financing platform which provides impact with these research and projects in innovation, but also provides the reason for people to look values to invest in this channel, which is professionally run in a way that it could integrate everybody to input into it, meet their interests, but at the same time also meet the interest of innovation, solving problem in the society, and creating next-gen value-based industries. I'll stop with that.
Thank you, sure. Yeah, of course.
In light of everything that's being said here, as far as the government, the private sector, I'm trying to bring this back to some of us here in the audience involved in this movement. And this morning, I watched a presentation that was done here by, I believe, 2 entrepreneurs. And I heard that before from multiple folks, but I was even more surprised to hear it from them. Namely, here's something great they feel they're doing, and which is really great they're doing, but they're sitting in a mall, and everybody's looking at them, what are you guys doing? What is that? And I think that's a great challenge and also a call to action here as far as this community is concerned, as far as this movement is concerned, the need for us to be more strategic in how we communicate. I don't think USAID gonna come to us because we're doing great things in labs. USAID gonna come to you because you're actually being proactive in telling USAID, if you don't come on board, you're missing this movement. If you don't come on board, you're missing this revolution that's taking place right now. So whether it's government, whether it's private entity, there are very few people out there who may not see exactly what's happening because, oh, it's just a whole bunch of geeks doing things. I can say geeks because I'm one of the geeks. But ultimately what I'm saying here, there needs to be some strategic thinking in terms of us, the community of makers out there, in understanding, yes, we're in the business of making things, but we're also in the business of communicating well, intelligently enough, so that we speak their language. So by the time the things we're doing, the things we think, again, it's not just for the sake of doing things, but those things that we are doing that has the potential to be transformative. So those who write the checks, they will feel guilty or even feel that's what it is. Because I used to work for 2 former US presidents. I was an executive for a philanthropic entity. We're always out there looking for the next big thing. But usually who do we fund? The people who come to our ears. Because again, we don't know what the next big thing is. We don't even understand it. So the notion that folks gonna come simply because we're doing great things, I'm saying in part is wishful thinking. We need to be out there strategically thinking how to actually communicate this, to make in certain communities, folks at the highest level of government, folks sitting in C-suite rooms, they understand there's something happening that's flying under the radar screen. You guys, all of us collectively, we don't just need to share information how to use a laser cutter, but we also need to lose information how to actually bring people on board. Ultimately, without that, regardless all the great things we're doing in the lab, it's just gonna be great little things we're doing in the labs. It's too important, the works I see some of those labs doing, for them to be sitting around and us chasing little pockets of money here and there. I think the trend needs to be reversed, and it's on us, it's on you sitting here to ensure that, how do we communicate that? How do we let the world know, hey guys, you're missing the boat here. The future is right now, and we're part of that future, and somehow you're not investing in it. So the government of Bhutan, as I'm saying it, is an exception to the rule. I worked for 5 presidents total. Chances are it would have taken me a long time to explain to them the notion of the need to invest in something like this. What is digital fabrication? But ultimately, it should have been the other around. Mr. Ambassador, how come we're not involved in this? What can we do to actually get involved in this? And to me, for that to happen, whether it's an aid agency, whether it's a philanthropic entity or government, there needs to be some collective effort here how to strategically address this issue. Otherwise, we're just gonna sit in our little rooms making great things without the transformative effect that we know this thing can have. The revolution is right now, not tomorrow.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, and I'd just like to remind you that please ask questions. You can at any point lift up your hand, or the people watching the online stream, if there are questions, just let us know, and then we'll ask the panel those questions as we go. John?
So let me just respond in part how USAID ended up in this panel today. I first came to your beautiful country just a couple months ago in March. And actually, Shirag, who was just over there, led us around the Superfab lab, and we were so impressed. I was here as part of a delegation, and he talked about the potential. We also met with Ujjul, and he talked about investment possibilities in Bhutan. Both of them mentioned Fab Bhutan 2023, and we became intrigued. Then we started virtual connections with Sherry, and things came together, and we decided, yeah, we can become part of this. At the same time, over the past couple of months, we've been involved in what we call a co-creation process with the Bhutan Foundation, one of the leaders in civil society and in Bhutan, looking at many of the issues and opportunities. And one of the issues, obviously, has been the exodus of youth to other countries, but also the many opportunities for bringing together, protecting the environment while we drive economic growth and create social opportunity. So we're structuring a new activity with the Bhutan Foundation, looking at youth engagement, looking at job skills creation, looking at involving them more closely in innovation and technology with respect to clean and renewable energy and many of the ideas that I was speaking of previously. Personally, I think there's a wonderful opportunity for the Superfab Lab to be more closely connected to these types of technologies. I've seen the solar thermal and the solar photovoltaic and the vertical axis wind turbines. There's a lot happening here. And the electric vehicles out on the side too. So great opportunity for youth to be involved and for the creation of jobs that will drive economic growth in the future. So I think that's why USAID is here today, and we're looking at these opportunities that we'll be able to partner with all of you on in the future. I'd also say that I agree with you, Paul, that success breeds success. The more we can document all the good things that are happening there, the more collectively we can create momentum. I would also end with a point, it's not just about money. It's also the currency of ideas that is so important. And those ideas can come from anyone. Any person sitting in this room can come up with that idea that'll really allow us collectively to move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. I want to come back to Dr. Cherry. A lot of what we are talking about requires energetic minds, creative minds. And we also mentioned a little bit about the perceived brain drain that we have at the moment happening, where we see a lot of kids and young people from 20 to about 35 leaving the country. And we feel that a lot of the great ideas and new entrepreneurs should come from that demographic. So in having been around the Bhutan government since it was created as a democracy, have you seen any change in the way that the government is trying to engage these people and to change maybe policies or regulations to try and help and make sure that we keep this demographic in Bhutan? Because they are a key aspect of economic growth. Without the people, we won't get the economic growth, right?
I think, Jacques, you're asking the wrong person. I'm not in government, I'm in competition with the government.
But that's the best place to be, right?
So, since you asked the question, I've got to give you a straightforward answer. I think we're doing precious little. We've got to do a lot more. We've talked about regulations and GNH regulations and how the Superfab Lab also passed the GNH regulations and all that. We've got to put a stop to that nonsense. We've got to look at the whole regulation landscape and see whether we are over-regulating ourselves or not. What regulations do we actually need and for what purpose? Implement them efficiently, intelligently, and quickly. Those regulations that are archaic and we have no idea why we have them in the first place, scrap them. It's easy for Ujjwal and DHI to say this was a problem, we've come up with a solution, and the government has supported us. This is DHI. This is the biggest company in Bhutan. This is the holding company of the government. The same rules do not apply to our young, energetic minds out here. If many of them want to go beyond the Super Fab Lab and the Fab Lab and actually design solutions and produce solutions to problems outside the Fab Lab, there are so many restrictions and so many regulations, and this is something that we need to have a proper look at. DHI can play a very important role because DHI is the success that will hopefully breed success. And we should know which regulations and which support, including financing. And Paul, we need USAID, we need grant financing, but we need investment, intelligent capital, as you put it. We cannot be overly dependent and continue to be dependent on handout. We need to do our hard work. We need to earn the investment, intelligent capital, domestically and from people like you, from abroad. And investors must find value in investing in our creative minds, in our wonderful country, investing in our brand. And they should find profit. It's not about dollars and cents, but it is also about dollars and cents. And unless we can break free of this mindset, right, where we are perhaps over-regulated, and we are looking for handouts, and we are looking for other people to provide the solution, we will not be seizing the opportunity. Until and unless we seize this opportunity and we create an entire ecosystem led by the government, supported by DHI, I'm afraid that our young minds, our creative minds are going to continue to go abroad. And unfortunately, many of them are not doing creative, innovative things abroad. We are doing menial work, manual work. My prayer is that many of them will go and learn new skills, acquire new skills, experiences, add value to their lives, and come back and take part in the nation building process. And you can do that while working from morning till night, doing manual work also, menial work. But you have to learn. Come back. And there's nothing short, this is about nation building. In fact, it is about nation survival. Nothing less. And so the government can do a lot. From regulations to support, from investments. The government should not be handing out money also. It should be investing money, perhaps through DHI. And the government must listen to DHI because DHI is a repository of knowledge and experience in terms of which areas we are overregulated and how we can support businesses in Bhutan. Once businesses become viable in Bhutan, our youth will stay in Bhutan. Why would anybody want to move out? So the job of the government is to create a landscape within Bhutan, inside our own country, in partnership with the rest of the world, in partnership with the best of the world, so that this landscape would continue to be home for our young minds, for our Bhutanese.
Thank you, Professor. I think this is a very important point, and I want to highlight it. And I'm going to ask a question to both, firstly, Ujjwal, and then to Jigme. We know what is happening. We understand why young people are leaving. We understand that they should come back at some point and use that knowledge to improve the economy and the people of Bhutan's life. And maybe the rest of the world. There's no reason why we can't have a unicorn in Bhutan. As the biggest employer and as the government, what are each of you two doing to create the environment for those people to want to come back?
DHI, as Excellency talked about, I think is gaining experience, has some experience in building industries, in operating it. We are not saying we are the best, but we have some experience. As Jacques, right, what you asked about what's DHI doing, I think one of the things I can say is we are trying to cooperate with the government and the governments, and also cooperate with the private sector. I think the solution is in cooperation. How do we cooperate with each other to build and pave a path forward? Probably I want to give an example of how government may need to invest in basic infrastructure for businesses and ideas and industries to flourish. If you look at internet, how much value addition in business has internet as a platform provided, not from where it was invented, but to the global world. So but who invests on internet in the beginning? And I think those kind of parameters will have to be looked at in terms of nation building, in terms of investing on basic infrastructure on which the entrepreneurs, the bright minds, the creative minds who may be today leaving will be able to leverage. And I think the national digital identity is in a way a platform that we have created for innovation to flourish. We can think of 101 different ideas from the bright minds here in Bhutan, around the globe, the bright minds, Bhutanese who are working outside to leverage this platform of self-sovereign identity, which provides us with identity on the internet with 100% surety. You can imagine what kind of businesses can grow out of it. What happened with internet and then the dot-com bubble? Of course, a lot of the dot-com bubble companies today, like the Amazon, thrives and survives, and it's changing itself to the new, new landscape of businesses. So, from the DHI side, I think what we're looking at, definitely looking to cooperate with the government and the private sector to provide that platform and build that industry that resonate with the mind of the young generation who may be leaving us, not all, but we hope to create that ecosystem, that innovation ecosystem in the country so that it resonates with the mind of the young generation who wants to contribute. And we hope not only our young generations to come back, we also want younger generation, older generation, passionate mind from around the world to contribute to this innovation ecosystem that we are trying to create in Bhutan. And as Paul rightly mentioned, the revolution is now, or maybe it has started yesterday.
Thanks, Jacques. So I think the difficulties that we have in the Bhutanese economy is we are an economy that is largely driven by government spending, right? I mean, our private sector is very small. I think, as His Excellency pointed out, there are not many opportunities for bright minds who want to do different things, and also a lot of regulatory challenges. And this is largely because of the silos that exist in government. We have many different agencies that function very independently. They work within their own responsibility and try to do everything end to end. And unfortunately, the world is different. The problems that we need to solve are much more cross-cutting. And because of that, the government of Bhutan has undergone a major transformation. Uh, uh, I I don't know of an example of a government where we've actually reduced a ministry. We've actually reduced a portfolio for a minister. We've actually created structures where ministries have to work in collaboration. We have created clusters where we have empowered government secretaries to become first among equals, with the added responsibility of managing cross-cutting responsibilities. We have created a government technology agency whereby we have consolidated not only all government investments in IT into one government agency, but we have empowered it with all IT, HR, human resources within that organization, and given it the mandate to actually transform government across sectors, right? We have the ability to really, truly benefit from digital transformation now because the structure enables it. So, yes, I think we are suffering because inherently our economy has been largely driven by government investment. Government investment into consumption, into infrastructure building. But now we are also looking at an opportunity for Bhutan, being a small country, but having the opportunity to be extremely nimble, extremely agile. And this is very much, inspired by His Majesty's vision for Bhutan. We are small, and there is beauty in being small. The difference is we can actually move much quicker, much faster than others who are much bigger and who have established investments that make it difficult for them. And I think the example of the national digital identity, what we are doing to modernize investments, to make the provision of healthcare sustainable, free healthcare, mind you, for the entire population, sustainable, are all movements in the line to create not only solutions to the problems that we face in Bhutan, but at the same time opportunities, new opportunities, because we are looking at leapfrogging the problems that we are facing today. We are creating new opportunities that can result in, I would say, anything is possible, right? Now, digital technologies, digital fabrication gives us the ability to do anything. It's only limited by your imagination. But we have to create the structures, we have to change the way that regulations are put in place. We have to ensure that funding or investments goes into the right place so that we accelerate new opportunities. Opportunities not so much only because it provides economic value, but more importantly, it inspires the innovative mind, the creativity to look at solving a problem that really matters. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Jigme. I'll come back to it. Before I take your question, Pastor Tsering just wants to make one point, and then I'll come to the lady in the front with the red shirt.
I beg your pardon. But so it's good that we are transforming ourselves, and it's good that we are no longer operating in silos as much as before. Full disclosure, I'm a part of the problem. I was a civil servant. I am a politician. I served in government as a prime minister. So when I identify the problems, when I flag the problems, I am one of them. In my defense, I can say that when we were in government, the economy was not in crisis. Okay, now it's in crisis. So we need to be bold. We're talking of the internet. We're talking of technology and blockchain and super fab labs and all that. Do you know what the price of internet is in Bhutan? In Nepal, for 60 Mbps or more, unlimited data, they pay something like 650 nilterms a month. 650 nilterms a month. In India, they pay about 900 nilterms a month. In Bhutan, we pay 35,000 nilterms a month. How are we going to leverage on internet to advance society? In Nepal, they pay 650 nilterms a month for 60 Mbps. In Bhutan, it's something like 550 nilterms a month for 1 Mbps. And you'll be lucky if we actually get that 1 Mbps. I am impatient. And I have reason to be impatient because some of the most profitable companies are our internet companies. Where is our master plan? Where is our game plan? Where is our direction? Where is the monitoring? And it's these guys, the young people out there, who want to solve 10 by 10 matrices in our phones. Or 50 by 50 matrices. You'll get bankrupt. Don't do that. You will get bankrupt. Okay. This is the reason, well, part of the reason. This is part of the reason why we use internet as a product, not as a tool. We're on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. We are consuming the internet and paying exorbitantly high rates. We are not using it as a tool to advance our country. We are not using it as a tool to explore opportunities so that our youth can stay here, and that so that youth who have migrated and are working and acquiring both capital, knowledge, experience can come back and reinvest in our country. There's absolutely no dialogue from the government or from any organization on how to attract our people back. And definitely, by way of using the internet, we've got to do something.
Definitely. Thanks, you. That's what's saying.
I'm going to stand up. I've been listening to you all and being very excited about what you're saying, but also very frustrated. And if you don't mind, I'm going to sort of tell a little story here. Hold on just a second. So this conference is about designing resilient futures, right? And during the pandemic, Fab Labs and makerspaces all over the world stepped up to the plate, and many of them for free provided, PPE. They provided, in some cases, medical devices that were really critical. In India, there was an amazing project where I think 40 Fab Labs and makerspaces across the country got together. They were all, in their own Fab Labs, quarantined, but they did the work to provide their communities with what they needed. Now, during the pandemic and after the pandemic, many of us from the UK, from India, from the US, we approached government, we approached USAID, we approached, some of the other large sort of humanitarian aid organizations. We said, hey, we're here. Look, we can help. We have helped. We should be part of the conversation. We can help you. Will help us help you? And largely, it fell entirely on deaf ears. And that was a perfect example of how this kind of a distributed network can really benefit the resilience of communities. So, I feel like part of the answer is, especially when you talk about humanitarian aid, is about how you invest in a community over the long term. And this kind of infrastructure and the human capital that you build is part of that infrastructure. But there's some disconnect, and I cannot figure out what it is. How do we get your attention, right? How do we frame the story in a way that that you will want to invest, that you will want us, right? I mean, I feel like some of the problem is in mindset. It's, you know, large organizations and aid agencies and governments and even funding agencies are very risk adverse. But this is a small risk if you really think about it. If you're investing in individual communities, it's not a big risk. We also don't have the kind of metrics that you're looking for. Usually it feels like you're looking for giant metrics that cross, you know, nations, that cross the whole world. And we're in small communities. We're a distributed network, mostly small organizations that serve small communities. So what can we do to help, and what can we do to get your attention? You know, in a situation which I felt was so obvious how we could be part of the conversation, and we actually reached out, no one listened. So that's my question, is how can we get your attention?
Good question. I'm going to take a stab at this because this is part of my own struggle in understanding exactly what can be done differently. I'm wearing my former executive hat as a funder to answer part of this question. And it goes along the line of, like I said, understanding the language of folks with means. In other words, simply because you're doing the good thing, the right thing, doesn't necessarily mean people understand it, or doesn't necessarily people aligns with it until they see themselves in it. So from that standpoint, that's the advocacy I'm pushing for a little bit. That's why I'm saying we need to be more strategic in how we approach this. We should not be right now in the business of chasing folks. Folks should be in the business of chasing us if we're doing this strategically well. So from that standpoint, I'm making the argument, let's do things intelligently. And allow me to take an example from the friend next to me here. I come from one of the poorest countries in the world. I'm sitting in Washington, D.C., trying to kind of sell a different Haiti. A Haiti that has nothing to do with charity, Haiti that has nothing to do with somebody gifting us something, to the point the Prime Minister was making. We want to stand on 2 feet. We can fall, but we're going to get up. We don't want to be a special needs students in the classroom. For that to happen, it requires a different conversation. For that to happen within the community of Fab Labs, I'm saying it requires a different conversation. One of the things I'm advocating for, and I'm part of this leapfrog movement, I'm one who convinced for Haiti and other small countries, small frontier economies to grow, they cannot do it incrementally today in 2023. We need to find the right formula. We need to find the right engineering using things like digital fabrication and other tools so we can leapfrog ourselves into being competitive just like the rest of the world. I'm saying technically that can be done. Now, for that to happen, it requires a different ways of looking at how to do things. In my case, for instance, I say to people in Haiti, if USAID came knocking for the Fab Lab, I'm saying thank you, but no thank you. In part of this whole thing about intelligent money, I'm not saying USAID money is not intelligent. I'm saying in my context, it's not intelligent. Here's what I'm saying by that. Everything is being gifted to us. And I'm saying if I were to create a Fab Lab today in Haiti, I don't want USAID names all over the place. And when the light bulb goes out, people in the community are thinking the only way we can get the light bulb back is to add another project to USAID. That is not sustainable. That is not intelligent capital. That is not smart money to me. So I'm saying as we continue to find the right engineering, I'm also advocating for you guys to have a different conversation with these folks. Because everything is already set in motion in Washington, in their case, how the money gonna be spent. And when it comes to politicians, when it comes to philanthropic entities, most folks, like I said, they're looking for the sexy thing. But the language you may be speaking to them is just not that interesting. I used to be frustrated with 2 former US presidents I used to work for because of half-baked ideas people used to whisper in their ears as things they should be funding. Whereas the stuff that has real meat on the bone, nobody's paying attention to them. And for that to change, That's what I'm talking about, the advocacy some of us need to do. How do we sit back and begin to exchange information, exchange knowledge, so that I'm not sitting in a lab trying to make things, but I'm one of those people out there on the front line as part of that revolution we're talking about. Let me begin to talk differently with the person in charge of USAID in Washington, D.C. Let me begin to start differently with some of the corporate world, so that it's just not some petty money they're throwing at us, but something that has real meaning, that would have real transformation potential. And for that to happen, again, Sherry, in my view, we are at this critical, we are at a crossroad here. This thing can be just a cute project, or it can be something real, something big. Every time I walk into a lab, I see what's happening, I get goosebumps. And I'm saying, if I get goosebumps about what I see some of these young folks are doing, we shouldn't be chasing USAID. They should be chasing us, because we are the agents of change. So for that to change, it requires a different conversation, a different narrative in terms of what we do, what we can potentially do, and more importantly, what role they can play into that movement. Those are my 2 cents.
We must make him, take the mic away from him. We must make him irrelevant. So to keep to enhance the sustainability of our Fab Labs, as Paul, you very articulately and passionately mentioned, we have to wean ourselves. They've done their job. We've got to wean ourselves from aid, and we need to go towards investment. This is where you come in. Now put your money where your goosebumps are now. Yeah. He has a ton of money. If you believe it, you invest here. Yeah. And he has the networks. He can draw FDI to Bhutan. For that, we have to follow up with him. And we've got to follow up with DHI, because they have money. They have capital to invest intelligently, not just in the labs, but the product that come out from the labs that will transform lives. And then we've got to talk to DHI, to GovTech, because they are the ones who will unshackle many of us, remove the regulations. But Paul, I agree with you. I agree with you. The less we deal with agency, the less dependent we are with aid agencies, the better off we can become. But for that, we have to be willing to stand on our own 2 feet. But I don't agree with you that we should continue the conversation with them. We've got to move the conversation to FDI, foreign direct investment, domestic investment, our own government for regulations.
So,
Thank you,
let me just jump in briefly. And Sherry, I don't know who you had the conversation with in USAID, but the way USAID operates is in 100 different missions around the world, and actually funding decisions are made based on those specific countries, generally not in Washington. Washington allocates funds out to the field. The policy, yes. I agree with the point in terms of foreign direct investment should be driving economic growth. And in fact, if you look the world over, official development assistance pales in comparison to foreign direct investment. I personally, and there are experts here on Bhutan, but in the United States and the world over, I think the role of government is to create that enabling environment, structure policies, from time to time create incentives that can drive economic growth and facilitate it. The role of development organizations like USAID is to partner from time to time, build those relationships, partner, and to help prime the pump, but then to step out of the way. And whenever we invest, we structure a sustainability plan that looks at economic growth, social development, environmental protection, but also what is the end game? What happens once USAID funding ends? And that's very important for sustainability. The sooner that can be achieved, the better for all. Thanks.
Thank you, John. I'm conscious of time, so literally only Ushwal and Jigme, you haven't made a statement to end with. Do you want to make a statement?
Right. Thank you. On a lighter note, on a lighter note, I do urge everyone to please keep solving the 50 by 50 matrix, as Excellency mentioned, because we have the computing power on our hands. But I completely agree with Excellency's comment that our internet costs are very exorbitantly high. And I'm not shying away from that. And that's a problem that we need to tackle. Well, we'll not get into the conversation of what and how on that, but we do want to mention that it's much better progressively 3 years ago to today, if you compare. But that's definitely not the attitude we want to have today with the problem that you have raised, Your Excellency. But please do keep computing the 50 by 50 matrix, because the computing power on our hands are amazing to solve any problems because everything is solved by computing at the end, right from abacus to what we have today. That's on the lighter side, but as a concluding remark, amazing conversation. I think the grant and aid to FDI financing to raise our economy is amazing way to look at things. We want, from DHI side, to be partners in development with our partners around the world. So we look for investments as equal partners because we bring something on the table, the FDI partner brings something on the table. How do we make businesses sustainable? Covering up with Super Lab, very excited. Anything that happens in Super Lab can be the next FDI investment. So let's keep innovating in the lab and let's keep looking for people who can support in terms of making that as a business with values, but sustainable in the long run. Thank you.
So, what I would like to say towards the ending is just building on what I touched on earlier. Bhutan is small. We are nimble. We want to do the right things. We are very interested to work with people who have shared values, and we want to work towards solving big problems that will change the lives of our people. I think from GovTech's perspective, we have been empowered now. We have the ability to use technology to change regulation. We are doing things like the National Digital Identity, which allows us to do that. Just to reinforce the fact that Bhutan is small and nimble, we actually vaccinated the entire population in 4 days. Before the pandemic, we hardly had actionable data about where people lived and the difficulties that they faced. After the pandemic, or because of the pandemic, and because of the leadership and interventions that were made by His Majesty and the government, we were able to go down to individuals to find out where the most vulnerable were. We were able to go into lockdowns where we were able to deliver food for individual houses. That type of intervention is possible in Bhutan. And we believe that we can work with FDI to bring about transformation, not only for Bhutan, but possibly in that process, identify value for the world as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Green. I'd like to firstly thank all of the panel members for taking time out of your extremely busy days to come here and have this discussion. It was a very fruitful discussion, in my opinion, and I think it's a discussion that should continue. And I'd also like to thank everybody that was here. It's a very hot hall, and we apologize for that, but thank you for sticking with us and staying here for the whole event. Please enjoy the rest of the day at our Super Fab Lab and go and spend some time in the Fab Lab if you haven't been there. Thank you very much.